The flames of Terra's unification had not yet been extinguished, but the Emperor's vision for humanity reached far beyond the cradle of mankind's birth. The stars awaited, and the first steps toward the Great Crusade began in the early 700s of the 30th millennium. It was during this time that the Emperor of Mankind turned his gaze to Terra's moon, Luna, and the secrets it harbored. The Selenar gene cults, isolated yet formidable, controlled genetic technologies vital to the expansion of the newly formed Space Marine legions, but they rejected the Emperor's overtures of diplomacy. Thus, war became inevitable. The conquest of Luna marked the first campaign in which the Space Marine legions fought beyond Terra's atmosphere. 3 legions, the 7th, 13th, and 16th, later to be known as the Imperial Fists, Ultramarines, and Luna Wolves, respectively, were chosen for this historic assault. Rocket engines roared as the Emperor's forces ascended from Terra, their launch lighting the skies of a world still fractured by the ongoing unification wars. The yet unnamed 16th Legion was selected to lead the charge, embodying the vanguard of the Emperor's growing army. In a daring and ruthless strike, the 16th Legion descended upon Luna with overwhelming force. While their brother legions drew the Selenar's defensive fire, the warriors of the 16th pierced the gene cult's fortifications. Within 6 solar hours of the campaign's first strike, Luna's defenses crumbled. The survivors of the Selenar, seeing their annihilation was inevitable, surrendered and bent the knee to the Emperor of Mankind. They transmitted their capitulation directly to Terra, begging the Emperor to call off his wolves. Thus, the 16th Legion earned its name, the Luna Wolves. Among the spoils of this brief but significant campaign was evidence of occult practices buried deep within the Selenar gene rights vaults. Though the cult's technologies were swiftly repurposed for the Imperium, their forbidden methodologies were sequestered in the Emperor's most secretive chambers, deep within the Imperial dungeon beneath the palace on Terra. This conquest not only marked the Imperium's first off-world victory, but also secured the resources needed to fuel the burgeoning Great Crusade. 9 years after Luna's pacification, the unification wars on Terra came to an end. The Emperor consolidated his control over the world, bringing centuries of conflict and bloodshed to a decisive close. With his banner raised high over the ruins of ancient empires, the Emperor declared Terra unified under his rule. It was here that the Emperor's dream of a galaxy-wide human dominion truly began to take shape. But the Emperor's victory was not only military. He now turned his efforts toward forging the ideological foundation of the Imperium. The imperial truth, a rationalist secular philosophy rejecting all forms of superstition, religion, and mysticism, was to be enforced across Terra. Yet even as the Emperor proclaimed the death of gods, otherworldly powers stirred in the shadows, watching and waiting. The Emperor's ambitions were vast, but to fulfill them, he required the technological and industrial might of Mars. The Red Planet, home to the ancient Mechanicum, was a world of fire and steel, its surface dotted with vast forged cities and crawling with towering titans. Yet Mars was not Terra's mirror. Its rulers followed the cult Mechanicus, a techno-religion devoted to the worship of the machine god, the Omnissiah. The Mechanicum's forges were indispensable, but war with Mars would have been a costly endeavor, threatening to stall the Emperor's Great Crusade before it could begin in earnest. Instead, the Emperor sought an alliance. His arrival on Mars was marked by a moment of profound significance. Many tech priests, upon seeing him, claimed to sense the presence of the Omnissiah himself. To them, the Emperor was no mere man, but the living embodiment of their god. This meeting culminated in the signing of the Treaty of Mars, also known as the Treaty of Olympus Mons. The terms were clear. In exchange for peace and autonomy, Mars would supply the Imperium with its mighty starships, weapons, and machinery of war. Mars would retain the right to practice its faith and maintain control over the forged worlds it had settled across the galaxy. However, the Mechanicum was bound by the Emperor's decree to never again develop forbidden technologies such as abominable intelligence, an echo of humanity's near annihilation during the Age of Strife. With this alliance, the Imperium gained not only Mars's immense industrial capacity, but also its armies of titans and the scientists and engineers of the cult Mechanicus. The twin-headed Aquila, symbol of the Imperium, was reshaped to represent this unity. One head for Terra and one for Mars. Together, they would form the twin pillars of humanity's future dominion over the stars. Even as the Emperor's plans for the Great Crusade accelerated, tragedy struck his most ambitious project. In the depths of Terra's gene labs, the Emperor had labored to create 20 beings of unparalleled power and intellect, the Primarchs. These superhuman children were to be generals, statesmen, and leaders of humanity, destined to command the newly formed Space Marine legions. They embodied the Emperor's vision of perfection, combining the height of genetic science with otherworldly knowledge. But the ruinous powers of chaos, ever watchful and envious of the Emperor's aspirations, intervened. As the Primarch project neared completion, the warp itself was roused. Through its malevolent influence, the 20 gestation pods containing the Primarchs were torn from Terra's labs and scattered across the galaxy. Each was cast onto a different world, far from the Emperor's grasp. The loss was catastrophic, but the Emperor remained undeterred. Though the Primarchs were gone, their genetic templates remained. From these, the Emperor had already crafted his Space Marine legions, each drawing strength and character from the gene seed of their absent Primarch. It was now the task of the Great Crusade not only to unify the galaxy, but also to recover these lost sons of the Emperor. As the 30th millennium unfolded, the Imperium was no longer a fledgling dream, but a reality taking its first steps into the void. Terra and Mars were united, the Space Marine legions were growing, and the Emperor's banner stretched far beyond the confines of Earth's skies. Yet even as the Imperium gained momentum, dark forces gathered in secret. The galaxy awaited conquest, but it would not yield easily. The seeds of greatness and of ruin were being sown. The Great Crusade began as an unparalleled endeavor, a galaxy-spanning quest to reunite the scattered remnants of humanity. With Terra unified and the Sol system falling under Imperial control, the Emperor launched his grand vision for a new golden age in 798 of the 30th millennium. Across the galaxy, the dream of the Imperium of Man began to take shape, carried on the banners of the Space Marine legions and the Mechanicum's mighty fleets. The Emperor had resolved that no world would remain beyond his reach. But even in these early years, not all resistance to Imperial rule had been extinguished. On Terra itself, deep in the Boedian lowlands, one of the last bastions of defiance refused to yield. The Boedians had long held out against the Unification Wars, their defiance tracing back to the Dark Age of strife. When Imperial army forces sought to bring them into compliance, the Boedians dug in and resisted. It was here that the newly formed 15th Legion, eager to prove themselves in battle, was unleashed. In a campaign lasting a mere 6 solar weeks, the warriors of the 15th Legion shattered the Boedian resistance, driving its armies to surrender in a stunning display of tactical brilliance. Their effectiveness did not go unnoticed by the Emperor. Shortly after the campaign's conclusion, the 15th Legion was bestowed with a name that would echo through the annals of history, the Thousand Sons. With their baptism in fire complete, the Thousand Sons joined their brother legions as part of the Great Crusade. Not all battles in this period were fought on planetary soil. Among the Azerite stations of Uranus, a string of crescent-shaped void citadels that had been pressed into service to support the Great Crusade, another conflict erupted. These stations were home to scavengers and void-dwelling artisans who had only recently sworn loyalty to the Emperor. Their newfound compliance was soon tested by the arrival of solar pirates, outlaws and mutants who sought to undermine the fledgling Imperium. The pirates entrenched themselves within the Azerite stations, waging a brutal war against both the newly compliant Azerites and the Imperial forces assigned to defend them. It was the 7th Legion, the Imperial Fists, who answered the desperate cries for aid. In their stoic and unrelenting fashion, 50 warriors of the Imperial Fists forced their way into the fortified stations. The fighting was bloody, but victory was within reach, until the pirates unleashed a devastating psi plague, an ancient bioweapon thought eradicated during the Unification Wars. The psi plague threatened to spread, corrupting not only the station but the entire Sol system if left unchecked. In an act of supreme sacrifice, the 50 Imperial Fists overloaded the reactors of the station, obliterating themselves and their enemies in a massive explosion. The psi plague and the horrors it carried were eradicated forever. When the Emperor learned of their heroism, he ordered the Bell of Lost Souls in the Imperial Palace tolled for the first time, a somber tribute to the warriors who had given their lives in defense of humanity. By 798, the Sol system was firmly in Imperial hands, and the Great Crusade expanded outward. Mechanicum explorator fleets, brimming with resources and war machines, departed to chart nearby sectors of the galaxy. At their vanguard were the Space Marine legions, whose banners now heralded conquest and unity. Among their early campaigns was the crushing of the Venori Resurgence, a psychic rebellion that had risen in defiance of the Emperor's rule. On the fringes of the Pan-Pacific enclaves, the Crimson Walkers of the Venori used their unrestrained psychic powers to dominate populations and raise grotesque armies of flesh-crafted golems. They faced a fitting end at the hands of the 8th Legion, the Night Lords. The Night Lords, masters of terror and psychological warfare, brought an end to the Venori with savage efficiency, ensuring that no trace of their rebellion remained. The Great Crusade's greatest triumphs, however, lay not only in conquest, but in the recovery of what had been lost. In 801, the first of the Emperor's missing Primarchs was rediscovered. On the mining world of Chthoniya, the Emperor reunited with Horus, his son and creation. Raised in the brutal underworld of Chthoniya's gang warfare, Horus had forged himself into a natural leader and fearsome warrior. When the Emperor found him, Horus swore fealty to his father and was entrusted with the command of the 16th Legion, the Luna Wolves. For many years, Horus stood as the Emperor's only recovered son and closest companion. Together, they forged the early triumphs of the Great Crusade, their bond shaping the future of the Imperium. Even as the Emperor's vision unfolded, whispers of old treacheries still lingered within the Sol system. On the asteroid prison colony of Cerberus, the Emperor faced a grim reminder of his earliest creations. The Warhounds, the 12th Legion, were dispatched to crush an insurrection among the prison's population of renegades and outlaws. Yet within the chaos of the uprising, the Emperor's forces uncovered a terrifying truth. Among the insurrectionists were renegade Thunder Warriors. These genetically engineered warriors, once the Emperor's chosen instruments in the Unification Wars, had been presumed wiped out after their purpose was fulfilled. Calling themselves the Datar, these Thunder Warriors now led the revolt, a bitter reminder of the Emperor's discarded tools. The Emperor's orders were clear. The Warhounds were to bring the colony back into compliance and erase all traces of the rebellion. The campaign lasted a mere 5 solar hours. Praetor Commander Caleb Hax of the 12th Legion transmitted the signal from Cerberus Primary. The colony had been retaken, the Emperor's will imposed, and the Datar annihilated. With their task complete, the Warhounds turned their gaze to the stars, their savage reputation growing as they marched forward to join the Great Crusade. The Great Crusade was still in its infancy, but its momentum was undeniable. The Emperor's armies marched further into the void, reclaiming ancient human worlds and uniting them under the banner of the Imperium. Yet, with every victory, the Imperium moved closer to its inevitable tests, trials that would shape its destiny for millennia to come. The Great Crusade continued to expand, pushing beyond the Sol system and into the stars. In the early 800s of the 30th millennium, the Imperium's forces encountered the Consus Drift, a vast belt of stellar debris woven together by tunnels made from the twisted metal of shipwrecks. This region had been inhabited for millennia by the Driftborn, humans stranded in the void during the Age of Strife, who had become masters of survival and brutal void warfare. The discovery of the Drift was an accident, as the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, commanded by the Imperial Fists of the 7th Legion, was caught in a stellar anomaly called the Mirror Race and thrown into the region. The Driftborn clans fought fiercely, their intimate knowledge of the treacherous void proving to be a deadly advantage. However, their courage was no match for the transhuman strength and discipline of the Space Marines. The commander of the Imperial Fists offered the Driftborn a stark choice: submit to Imperial compliance or face extermination. The clans, seeing the futility of further resistance, surrendered. Yet the Driftborn would not escape unscathed. The Imperial Fists took the youngest and strongest male warriors from each clan, inducting those who survived the trials of initiation into the 356th Company of the 7th Legion. This new unit, born from the void, would go on to achieve legendary status as masters of out-hull void warfare and starship assaults. The Imperium's ambitions were not confined to human worlds. In 803, the Emperor turned his attention to Sedna, an artificial Xenos construct on the outer edge of the Sol system. Sedna had long served as a psychic anchor for an alien species bound together by unknown warp-based forces. 8 full Space Marine legions were deployed to destroy this nemesis world in a campaign that would become known as the Sedna Campaign. The combined might of the Space Marines obliterated Sedna's defenders, silencing the world and severing its psychic influence. After its fall, Sedna vanished from Imperial records, its location and nature shrouded in mystery. It was also during this time that the Thousand Sons of the 15th Legion began to uncover the full extent of their psychic gifts. Unlike many of their brother legions, the Thousand Sons embraced these abilities, seeking to emulate the Emperor's mastery of the warp. Their sorcerers wielded incredible power, bending entire populations to their will without the need for costly conquests. But the Legion's joy was short-lived. These psychic gifts came with a terrible price: the flesh change. This degenerative mutation began to affect large numbers of Thousand Sons, twisting their bodies into grotesque and mindless chaos-spawned abominations. The flesh change ravaged the Legion's numbers, and fear of its spread haunted the Thousand Sons as they struggled to maintain their strength amidst the horror. In the same year, the Imperium's explorers continued to chart the galaxy, identifying and claiming systems of strategic value. Among them was the Primarchs system, a trinary star system with vast mineral wealth and 37 major satellites. Discovered by rogue trader Hel D. Aniasi, its stable warp-synchronous location made it a vital waypoint for the Imperium's expansion into the Segmentum Obscurus. It quickly became a hub for supply lines and exploratory fleets, a beacon of Imperial progress in the dark expanse of the galaxy. The Great Crusade was not without its perils. In the western reaches of the Segmentum Solar, the Imperium encountered the Akhereth, also known as the Bone Drinkers. These predatory fungoid parasites infested void ships and raided human settlements, feeding on the marrow of living victims in a process of slow and agonizing death. The Luna Wolves and the 8th Legion, not yet formally known as the Night Lords, were dispatched to eradicate this menace. Their campaigns were brutal and uncompromising, culminating in a series of extermination pogroms that wiped the Akhereth from existence. Humanity's dominion over the void grew stronger, but the galaxy's horrors only deepened as the Crusade advanced. By 805, the Emperor himself had rejoined the front lines, marching alongside his Primarchs. One of their most celebrated battles took place at the fortified city of Raylis, where the Emperor and Horus fought side by side. The defenders of Raylis, unwilling to accept the Imperial truth, used secret tunnels to launch a daring counterattack. Hundreds of shock troops infiltrated behind the Imperial lines, swarming the command encampment. The Emperor and Horus, caught unprepared and without their armor, fought back-to-back against the onslaught. At the height of the battle, a plasma blast struck Horus, stunning him and leaving him vulnerable. The Emperor stood over his fallen son, refusing to retreat until reinforcements arrived to drive the attackers away. This battle cemented the bond between father and son, a relationship that would define the early years of the Great Crusade. A year later, the Crusade brought the Emperor and Horus to the Telon Reach, home to the Orc Empire of Goro. This vast scrap world, rivaling the later Orc stronghold of Ulanor, was a linchpin in the Greenskin Empire. The Emperor declared that Goro must be destroyed, and so he led the assault personally, with Horus at his side. Together, they teleported into the subterranean tunnel networks that riddled the planet's crust, facing overwhelming Orc resistance. At the height of the battle, the Emperor became separated from his forces and was confronted by an Orc warboss of unprecedented size, larger than any greenskin mankind had ever encountered. The monstrous creature seized the Emperor in its massive bionic claw, threatening to crush the life from him. But Horus, driven by fury and loyalty, carved his way through the press of battle to reach his father. With a single blow, he severed the warboss's arms, freeing the Emperor. Together, they fought deeper into the heart of Goro, sabotaging its self-sustaining warp-fold envelope. As they escaped, the scrap world collapsed in on itself, imploding under its own weight and bringing the Orc Empire to ruin. The early years of the Great Crusade were marked by triumph and tragedy, by the discovery of strange new worlds and the annihilation of old enemies. The Emperor's vision was becoming reality, but the path forward was fraught with danger, and the greatest challenges were still to come. The 8th standard year of the Great Crusade saw the discovery and compliance of the Osiris Cluster, a grouping of 11 star systems nestled in the second quadrant of the segmentum solar. These systems, many of which housed technologically advanced human civilizations, represented a rare opportunity for peaceful integration into the growing Imperium. The 13th Legion played a key role in this campaign, negotiating and enforcing compliance with remarkable efficiency and minimal bloodshed. It was hailed as a model for the ideals of the Great Crusade, unity through cooperation, not conquest. The following year, however, brought the Imperium into more hostile territory. In 807, the X-Legion engaged in one of their most famous early battles, remembered as the Compliance of Vo 234, or the Battle of Rust. This arid wasteland world, known for its oxide deserts and the corroded remnants of long-dead cities, had been reduced to a slave mining colony under the control of the Orc Crooked Claw Empire. The Orcs, led by their infamous warlord Wardog Kulo, spanned more than 60 inhabited star systems, making them a significant threat to the nascent Imperium. The X-Legion, under the command of Lord Commander Amadeus Duquesne, spearheaded the invasion of Rust as part of the Emperor's broader Principia Imperialis expeditionary fleet. The campaign showcased the X-Legion's ruthless and methodical style of war, inspired by the battlecraft of Old Albia. Employing a strategy known as the Hammer and the Storm, the X-Legion launched a relentless series of assaults, grinding down the Orc defenders over many solar days. By the end, the Orcs simply ran out of bodies and machines to throw into the fray. Despite the ferocity of the fighting, the X-Legion suffered fewer casualties than expected, losing less than a fifth of their number. The victory was celebrated as a triumph of Imperial strategy, with Rust reclaimed for humanity at minimal cost. Elsewhere, the Great Crusade clashed with far deadlier foes. The war in the Shedem Drifts brought the Imperium face-to-face with the Eldari of Craftworld Mor-Rioi, a powerful and cunning adversary. Under the overall command of Horus Lupercal, the Luna Wolves engaged the Eldari in a brutal campaign that spanned the region. To break the Eldari's defenses, Horus employed a controversial tactic. He used a demi-legio of the Titan Legio Ataris, the Firebrands, as bait. Unaware of the true plan, the Firebrands were encircled and suffered catastrophic losses, diverting the Eldari's attention long enough for the Luna Wolves to launch a surprise assault on the Craftworld itself. Though the campaign ended in victory, with the Eldari shattered and the Craftworld destroyed, the cost to the Firebrands was immense. Their near annihilation left a deep scar, and the Legio Ataris would never forgive Horus for his cold and calculated sacrifice. The Shedem Drifts campaign became a bitter reminder that even in victory, the Great Crusade often came at great cost. In 813, the Forge World Mazoa officially joined the Imperium. Mazoa, originally established as an outpost of the Lucian Mechanicum centuries earlier, had grown into an independent forge world dedicated to the production of heavy arms and armor. Its warworld status made it a critical addition to the Imperium's expanding industrial base. The forges of Mazoa, said to have been influenced by both the Emperor and Ferrus Manus in later years, became a vital source of weapons for the Imperium's legions. 6 years later, the Emperor's journey to recover his lost sons brought him to the frigid death world of Fenris, where he found the Primarch Leman Russ. Russ, raised among the savage tribes of Fenris, challenged the Emperor to 3 contests: eating, drinking, and fighting. Though Russ bested the Emperor in the first 2, he was humbled in the third, acknowledging the Emperor's superior strength. Following his defeat, Russ swore fealty to the Emperor and was granted command of the 6th Legion, soon to be known as the Space Wolves. Their ferocity and loyalty would become legendary, as would the bond between Russ and his father. In 824, the Great Crusade pressed further into the galaxy. Ferrus Manus, another of the Emperor's lost Primarchs, was discovered on the harsh, metallic world of Medusa. There, Ferrus had spent his youth battling machine monsters and unearthing the buried secrets of his techno-barbaric homeworld. Rising to command over Medusa's rival techno-clans, Ferrus Manus forged his people into a powerful war machine. When the Emperor arrived, the two clashed in a cataclysmic meeting that ended with Ferrus Manus swearing allegiance to his father. Taking command of the 10th Legion, Ferrus renamed them the Iron Hands, reflecting his unyielding nature and dedication to the perfection of machine and flesh. That same year, the Imperium made contact with the planet Leith, located in the Chironid Deeps region. Discovered by rogue trader Vasperly Elgin, Leith became an early staging ground for the Great Crusade's advance into this distant area of the galaxy. Later integrated into the Imperial fold, Leith contributed elite pioneer light infantry cohorts to the Imperialis Auxilia, proving its value as both a strategic hub and a source of exceptional warriors. The Great Crusade marched ever onward, uniting lost human civilizations, forging new alliances, and bringing entire systems into compliance. Yet, the galaxy remained fraught with dangers, and the journey ahead promised even greater trials for the Emperor, his sons, and the Imperium they sought to build. The Proximan Rebellion of the late 800s of the 30th millennium stands as one of the earliest recorded engagements of the yet unnamed Third Legion. The insurrection began during what was meant to be a ceremonial moment, Proxima's formal accession into the Imperium. Acting as the Emperor's honor guard, the warriors of the Third Legion stood proudly beside the custodian guard as the event unfolded. But beneath the pomp and grandeur of the ceremony, a deadly trap had been laid. Insurrectionists launched a surprise attack on the ceremonial plaza, unleashing devastating firepower, including a forbidden vortex weapon, which struck the Emperor himself. Wounded and cut off, the Emperor fought his way clear, but only through the sacrifice of the 16th cohort of the Third Legion and their custodian allies. Every last warrior of the cohort gave their lives, refusing to yield even an inch of ground to the traitors. Their unbreakable stand bought the Emperor precious time to recover and escape. In honor of their sacrifice, the Emperor personally presented the standard of the Palatine Aquila to the Third Legion. The Aquila, fiercely defended on that fateful day, became the Legion's sacred relic, a symbol of their loyalty and valor. The Emperor granted them the unique right to display the Aquila upon their armor, a privilege no other legion would share. But the rebellion itself was not left unpunished. The Emperor gave the Third Legion the task of ending the Proximan revolt with utter finality, authorizing Exterminatus to repay the blood debt owed to their fallen brothers. For the Third Legion, this moment marked both triumph and tragedy, one that would resonate throughout their history. But their trials were far from over. Within a solar year of the Proximan Rebellion, catastrophe struck the Third Legion. A series of disasters began with the mysterious loss of their gene seed stock, which had been sent to Luna for storage and further development. Accounts of what happened vary. Some claim the void ship carrying the gene seed was destroyed by a hijacked defense laser operated by remnants of the Selenite gene cults, while others suggest the ship simply lost control and crashed. Whatever the cause, the result was the same. The Third Legion's genetic future was dealt a severe blow. Worse still, a second calamity followed in quick succession. A fast-acting viral blight dubbed the Blight infected the gene seed vaults on Terra, spreading with terrifying speed. The Mechanicum's Magi biologists worked desperately to contain the outbreak, but the infection, suspected to be of Xeno's origin, defied all treatment. Many legions suffered losses during this crisis, but for the Third Legion, the cost was total. Their remaining gene seed reserves were completely destroyed. Only the intervention of the Emperor himself, who personally purged the taint, saved other legions from the same fate. For the Third Legion, however, the damage was irreversible. They were left teetering on the brink of extinction. Amidst this turmoil, reports began to surface of anomalous Space Marine activity. Units bearing no clear Legion markings were observed carrying out clandestine operations, often in war zones or areas of high strategic importance. These mysterious warriors, referred to in whispers as the Ghost Legion, seemed to operate under unassailable clearance codes, allowing them to move without question. Their targets ranged from high-profile assassinations to abductions and raids, both on Terra and beyond. The true nature and allegiance of the Ghost Legion remained unknown, their existence shrouded in secrecy and speculation. Despite the hardships faced by the Third Legion, hope emerged in 830. The Emperor arrived on the industrial mining world of Chemos, where he was reunited with his lost son, Fulgrim. Fulgrim, raised in a resource-starved and ravaged society, had rebuilt his homeworld, transforming it into a thriving hub of industry and order. Upon meeting the Emperor, Fulgrim immediately recognized him for who he truly was. Bending his knee, Fulgrim swore eternal loyalty and offered his sword in service. Pleased with his son's devotion, the Emperor entrusted Fulgrim with command of the Third Legion. Fulgrim's first address to his legion was so moving that it brought even the Emperor to great pride. Declaring that the Third Legion would strive for perfection in all things, Fulgrim's words led the Emperor to rename the Legion as the Emperor's Children. This renaming was a tremendous honor, one Fulgrim vowed to uphold with his life. With their Primarch finally returned, the Emperor's Children embarked on a new chapter, their path forever altered by Fulgrim's vision of excellence. Soon after, the Great Crusade turned its attention to the Praxel system. A formidable human civilization with immense wealth and resources, Praxel refused to bow to the imperial truth, fielding a war fleet that repelled the initial invasion force sent by the Imperium. Determined to claim the system for the Great Crusade, the Emperor's Children, supported by the Imperial Army and Mechanicum forces, launched a massive second offensive. However, their pride proved to be a stumbling block. Despite their best efforts, the campaign dragged on, and casualties mounted alarmingly. Too proud to request reinforcements, the Emperor's Children continued their struggle alone until the War Council of Terra intervened. A combined force of Blood Angels and Imperial Fists was dispatched to aid the beleaguered legion. Though initially slighted by the perceived insult to their honor, the Lord Commander of the Emperor's Children set aside his misgivings and devised a new plan, coordinating with his cousin legions. With their combined strength, the second offensive against Praxel proved successful. The campaign was a bitter reminder that even the most elite legions could falter without unity. The Great Crusade, despite its victories, continued to test the strength and resolve of the Imperium's armies. The Emperor's vision pressed onward, but the challenges faced by his sons and their legions grew ever more complex, laying the foundation for triumphs and tragedies yet to come. The early years of the Great Crusade were filled with both glory and grim determination, as the Imperium pushed its reach further into the galaxy. On the periphery of the Dalanite Nebula, the Emperor's Children faced one such test during the Defense of Tranquility. This remote and seemingly worthless world held significance only because of the Tranquility Gate, a warp gate hanging in high orbit above the planet's pole. The gate was a vital strategic asset as it could drastically improve the Imperium's ability to navigate the warp and reach distant targets. A small force of just 500 warriors from the Emperor's Children was tasked with guarding the forward Imperial navigation relay built on Tranquility. Without warning, a Xenos fleet emerged from the warp gate, launching a ferocious ground assault. Although the Imperium's warships managed to repel the Xenos fleet in orbit, forcing their retreat back through the gate, the alien ground forces were left stranded. The Emperor's Children executed a methodical and vengeful counterattack, annihilating the invaders and securing Tranquility for the Imperium. The victory was another example of the Third Legion's precision and discipline, qualities that would continue to define them in the years to come. Around the same time, the Emperor's Children undertook another campaign of grim necessity, the extinction of the Katara. The Katara were an insular abhuman civilization in the Kennuit system, initially offering no resistance when the Imperium made contact. However, when asked to formally surrender, tensions erupted. A lone Kataran warship destroyed the Imperial light cruiser Locrian before withdrawing. In retaliation, acting Lieutenant Commander Abdamon of the Emperor's Children ordered an invasion of the largest Kataran city complex. The Katara, desperate to avoid further bloodshed, proposed a truce. The conflict would be decided by single combat between champions. Abdamon agreed, entering the field himself as the Imperium's champion. The duel was fierce and bloody, but the Imperial warrior ultimately struck the killing blow. Accepting their defeat with honor, the Kataran leaders ordered their people to embrace death. In a final act of defiance, they fell on their swords before Abdamon. Across their domains, The entire Kataran population followed suit, leaving their cities as vast, silent tombs. The Emperor's children, showing respect for the Katara's courage and self-sacrifice, departed the Kinuit system, leaving their world as a mortuary world to stand as a solemn monument to the fallen. The Great Crusade also uncovered betrayal within its own ranks. In the Ordoni cluster, the Imperium had once welcomed the warlord Vitala Geron Terentius into its fold. Terentius rose to prominence over 5 decades, conquering worlds in the Emperor's name and earning the favor of Malcador the Sigillite and even several Primarchs. Yet, at the height of his power, Terentius turned against the Imperium, launching a contra-crusade to conquer already compliant worlds for his own empire. The Imperium's response was swift and merciless. Horus, commanding the Luna Wolves, was sent to bring the renegade to justice. Heavy support from the Night Lords, Iron Hands, and Alpha Legion joined the Luna Wolves in the campaign. The Imperial forces shattered Terentius's armies, fragmenting his realm and sowing terror with tales of decimated worlds. At the climax of the campaign, Horus and 50 of his elite Justaran Terminators teleported onto the bridge of Terentius's flagship. There, Horus slew the traitor with his talon, ending the rebellion. The punishment for Terentius's betrayal was total. The Night Lords enacted brutal purges across his rebel empire, slaughtering its population. The Iron Hands, supported by elements of the Ordo Reductor, destroyed every structure on Terentius's Bastion worlds, reducing his holdings to dust. Even the air of his homeworld was laced with toxins to ensure nothing survived. Once the castigation was complete, Horus sent Terentius's gold-dipped skull to Terra with a grim warning, so perish all traitors. In 832, the Emperor traveled to the volcanic world of Nocturne, where he discovered the Primarch Vulcan. Raised by a blacksmith amidst the fiery hellscapes of his homeworld, Vulcan had become a hero to his people, known for his immense strength and skill in forging weapons. When the Emperor arrived, he challenged Vulcan to a contest to slay one of the largest salamanders, the immense drake-like creatures native to Nocturne. During the hunt, Vulcan's life was endangered, and though the Emperor had already secured a larger prize, he chose to sacrifice his trophy to save his Gene son's life. This act of selflessness humbled Vulcan, who bent the knee to the Emperor and pledged his loyalty. Vulcan joined the Great Crusade, and after serving alongside the Emperor, he took command of the 18th Legion, the Salamanders. With Vulcan at their helm, the Salamanders would grow into a legion defined by their endurance, craftsmanship, and unwavering commitment to protecting humanity. The early phases of the Great Crusade demonstrated the heights of imperial ambition, the depths of betrayal, and the relentless march of unity under the Emperor's vision. Yet, as the Imperium continued to expand, it also revealed the complexities of war, loyalty, and the cost of unification. The galaxy's countless challenges would test not only the Emperor's armies, but the resolve of the Master of Mankind himself. In 833, the Osiris cluster, once a model of peaceful compliance, erupted into rebellion. For reasons unknown, the 11 star systems declared independence from the Imperium, triggering a swift response from the 13th Legion. The 12th Expeditionary Fleet was dispatched, led by Legion Commander Gren Vasotho, with orders to suppress the rebellion. However, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. A failure of intelligence left the 13th Legion unprepared for the emergence of the Osiran Cybrids, a vile Xenos species capable of psychically enslaving the human population. Entire worlds were turned against the Space Marines as the Cybrids drove the Osirans into suicidal assaults on the Legion's forces. The campaign became a battle of attrition, with the Cybrids using their enslaved armies to wear down the 13th Legion. After suffering catastrophic losses, Vasotho ordered a retreat, but during the withdrawal, the fleet's flagship, Sethon's Thunder, was lost with all hands, including Vasotho himself. Command fell to First Captain Marius Gage, who ordered a blockade of the Osiris cluster while reinforcements were mustered. A year later, the 12th Expeditionary Fleet returned, bolstered by elements of the Solar Armada, the 18th Legion, and anti-Psyker cadres from Terra. To their astonishment, they found the cluster in ruins. Entire worlds were littered with the unburied dead, and others had descended into chaos and civil strife. The Osiris Rebellion ended in devastation, with the Cybrids' fate remaining a mystery. In 835, the Great Crusade reached the Inuit cluster, a frigid region of ice worlds ruled by the Primarch Rogel Dorn. Dorn, the seventh Primarch to be rediscovered, greeted the Emperor aboard the Phalanx, a colossal starship from the Age of Technology that he had restored to full operation. Recognizing Dorn's skill and unwavering resolve, the Emperor welcomed his son into the fold and entrusted him with command of the 7th Legion. Dorn transformed his legion into the Imperial Fists, a force renowned for their mastery of fortification and siege warfare. The Phalanx became their mobile fortress monastery, a testament to Dorn's pragmatic and disciplined leadership. 2 years later, in 837, the Emperor reunited with another of his sons, Robut Guilliman. Born on the prosperous world of Macragge, Guilliman was raised by a noble consul and proved to be a prodigy in leadership and strategy. By the time the Emperor arrived, delayed by warp storms, Guilliman had already forged the realm of Ultramar, a thriving stellar empire encompassing the 500 worlds. The Emperor was deeply impressed by Guilliman's organizational genius and his ability to inspire loyalty. Command of the 13th Legion was passed to Guilliman, who reshaped them into the Ultramarines. Under his leadership, the Legion would become the largest and most disciplined of all the Space Marine legions, embodying Guilliman's vision of unity and order. In 840, the Emperor traveled to the remote world of Prospero, where he detected a strong warp presence. There he found Magnus the Red, his most psychically gifted son. Magnus, towering and brilliant, embraced the Emperor as his father and eagerly accepted command of the 15th Legion, the Thousand Sons. In the years that followed, Magnus and the Emperor worked closely together, with Magnus learning the intricacies of the warp and refining his psychic powers under the Emperor's tutelage. The same year, the Great Crusade turned to the war-torn Forge world of Enkaladian. The 4th Legion, the Iron Warriors, spearheaded the campaign to liberate the planet from decades of conflict. Their methodical approach, combining rational strategy with a relentless will to endure, eventually led to victory. However, the year-long campaign came at a heavy cost, with the 8th Expeditionary Fleet suffering near total losses among its frontline forces. Many questioned whether the victory had been worth the price paid, a critique that would haunt the Iron Warriors throughout their history. In 843, the Imperium encountered the sovereign forge domain of Xana. A damaged vessel belonging to rogue trader Casalida Dianiasi had been thrown off course after a skirmish with Fra'al corsairs. At the edge of the intergalactic void, it was intercepted by 3 enormous automata warships. To the crew's surprise, these vessels offered aid instead of hostility, bearing a message of greeting from the Forge Lords of Xana II and a proposal for diplomatic relations with the Imperium. The sovereign forge domain would become a valuable ally, albeit one with its own enigmatic motives and technologies. That same year, the Emperor made contact with the 9th rediscovered Primarch, Sanguinius. Born on the irradiated moon of Baal, Sanguinius was marked by his angelic wings and psychic foresight. He ruled over the pious and radiation-scarred tribes of Baal, protecting them from the horrors of their world. When the Emperor arrived, Sanguinius had already foreseen his coming. He pledged his loyalty in exchange for the protection of his people. The Emperor granted him command of the 9th Legion, which Sanguinius remade in his own image, renaming them the Blood Angels. Under his guidance, the Legion became a force of grace and ferocity, feared by their enemies and beloved by their allies. In 846, the Great Crusade encountered the death world of Caliban. The Emperor discovered Lionel Johnson, a Primarch who had risen to lead the knightly orders of his world against the warp-spawned beasts that plagued it. When the Emperor arrived, Johnson quickly recognized him and swore fealty. Command of the 1st Legion was given to Johnson, who renamed them the Dark Angels, inspired by the allegorical figures of Calibanite myth. During the Emperor's time on Caliban, an assassination attempt was thwarted by Zahariel el-Zurias, a young librarian of the Dark Angels who would go on to gain prominence within the Legion. As the Great Crusade marched forward, the rediscovery of the Primarchs continued to strengthen the Imperium's forces. Each reunion brought new strengths, new legacies, and new hope for the Emperor's vision of unity. But with each triumph, the Imperium also uncovered greater dangers, both within and beyond its borders, as the galaxy's secrets continued to unravel. In 848, the Imperium turned its attention to the human-settled world of Sarash. Initially discovered by the White Scars, the world had seemed eager to join the Imperium, with its leaders expressing enthusiasm for the imperial truth. However, after more than a standard year under imperial rule, Sarash's planetary leadership had failed to meet any of the benchmarks of compliance. Governor Harlad I, appointed by the Imperium, was met with excuses that Sarash's vast planetary bureaucracy made progress slow and difficult. To accelerate the process, the Dark Angels were tasked with overseeing Sarash's compliance. However, during this time, an assassination attempt was made on the Primarch Lion L. Johnson by the Sarosi leader known as the Lord High Exactor. The plot involved smuggling a nucleonic device aboard L. Johnson's flagship, the Invincible Reason. Although the assassination failed, the incident revealed a horrifying truth. Sarash's bureaucratic system was a cover for a cult that communed with Xenos entities from an alternate dimension, likely the Warp. In response, the Dark Angels, supported by forces from the 4th Expeditionary Fleet, launched a ruthless campaign against the cult. In a short but brutal conflict, they annihilated all traces of the Sarosi cult and forced the planet into full compliance. Sarash, once a bastion of treachery, became a warning of the hidden dangers lurking even within seemingly willing subjects of the Emperor. The following year, in 849, the Emperor discovered Perturabo on the mountainous world of Olympia. Perturabo, a Primarch marked by his unrelenting intellect and grim pragmatism, had risen to prominence as both a scientific and military genius. When the Emperor reunited with him, Perturabo was granted command of the 4th Legion, which had been battered by costly campaigns during the early Great Crusade. Perturabo, ever a perfectionist, judged his legion harshly for their perceived failures and ordered their decimation, a punishment in which 1 out of every 10 Space Marines was executed by their own brothers. The remaining warriors, their hands stained with the blood of their kin, were forged into a force of unparalleled discipline and ruthlessness. Soon after assuming command, Perturabo led his legion on their first campaign under his leadership, the eradication of the Black Judges. These heretical, self-proclaimed arbiters of human purity ruled from the barren, ravine-scarred moon known as the Rock of Judgment. Once human, the Black Judges had degenerated into twisted and withered beings, enforcing their cruel laws across their domain. Driven by a desperate need to prove themselves to their new master, the 4th Legion unleashed their pent-up wrath on the Black Judges. Perturabo orchestrated the campaign with brutal efficiency, crushing the enemy without mercy. Every valuable resource, weapon, and piece of technology was stripped from the judges' holdings and delivered to Olympia or handed to the Mechanicum in exchange for their aid. The Rock of Judgment itself was dismantled, and its orbital shipyards were rebuilt around Olympia to serve the Iron Warriors, crafting a new generation of warships under Perturabo's command. In the years that followed, the Iron Warriors participated in some of the Great Crusade's most grueling campaigns. One such action was the pacification of Shravan, a joint compliance operation in the mid-850s that saw 4 Space Marine legions working together to eradicate the xenospecies known as the Badoon. The Iron Warriors won acclaim during the final assault, storming the last refuge of the Badoon and holding the line while their brother legions carried the battle beyond. During the victory feast that followed, Horus proclaimed Perturabo to be the greatest master of siege warfare in the Great Crusade. However, the celebration sowed seeds of discord. Fulgrim, ever the provocateur, jokingly asked Rogel Dorn whether he believed the defenses of the Imperial Palace, which Dorn had designed, could withstand the might of Perturabo and the Iron Warriors. Dorn, confident in his own abilities, replied that the palace's defenses could not be breached if properly planned. Perturabo, already bitter and insecure, interpreted Dorn's comment as an insult to his skill. Furious, he launched into a tirade of accusations against his brother. This incident permanently soured the relationship between the two Primarchs, and their legions rarely fought alongside one another for the remainder of the Great Crusade. The rise of Perturabo and the Iron Warriors reflected the dual nature of the Great Crusade, a time of unparalleled achievement, but also of growing tensions and rivalries among the Emperor's sons. While the galaxy continued to fall under the banner of the Imperium, the seeds of discord were already beginning to take root. In 854, the Great Crusade reached the toxic death world of Barbarus, where the Emperor discovered Mortarion, one of his lost Primarchs. Mortarion had been raised amidst the poisonous mists of Barbarus by the xeno-sorcerer known as Nikar, who ruled the world with an iron grip from his high citadel. Despite the oppressive rule of the Xenos' overlords, Mortarion rebelled, leading an army of Barbarus's oppressed humans in a brutal campaign to overthrow Nikare and his kin. However, while Mortarion and his forces had managed to overthrow many of the Xenos' tyrants, the highest and most fortified citadel of Nikare remained beyond their reach, sitting in the unbreathable upper mists of the planet. When the Emperor arrived on Barbarus with his Principia Imperialis fleet, he offered Mortarion his aid, but Mortarion, proud and defiant, rejected the Emperor's help, claiming that neither he nor his death guard required assistance to finish their quest for justice. The Emperor then challenged Mortarion. If he could defeat Nikare alone, the Emperor would leave Barbarus to its fate. But if Mortarion failed, he would join the Imperium and swear eternal fealty. Mortarion accepted the challenge and climbed the toxic heights to confront his foster father. Nikare's powers and the poisonous air overwhelmed Mortarion, but before his life could be taken, the Emperor intervened, striking down Nikare and saving his son. Bound by his oath, Mortarion bent the knee to the Emperor, though he harbored resentment for being denied his vengeance. Only after Mortarion's submission did the Emperor reveal their connection, naming himself Mortarion's true father and granting him command of the 14th Legion. Known as the Dusk Raiders at the time, Mortarion remade them in his own image, renaming them the Death Guard. Mortarion's warriors became synonymous with resilience and grim determination, unyielding even in the harshest of conditions. Yet Mortarion's bitterness over the events on Barbarus never faded, feeding a simmering resentment toward the Emperor that would plague him for years. Mortarion's first major campaign with the Death Guard came soon after, during the conquest of Galaspar, a hive world in the Segmentum Pacificus that had resisted Imperial compliance. The Death Guard's approach to war was brutal and methodical, and the aftermath of their conquest shocked even the supporting Imperial fleets. Billions of the planet's inhabitants were slaughtered, leaving the survivors terrified and eager to embrace the Emperor's rule. Galaspar's rapid fall sent a message to nearby systems, which capitulated to compliance without resistance, fearing the wrath of the Death Guard. Mortarion's methods were undeniably effective, but often left a trail of destruction that drew concern from others within the Imperium. One of Mortarion's most infamous campaigns occurred on the world of Kajor. The Death Guard encountered a savage warrior race of humans who had regressed into barbarism. Armed only with crude weapons like blades and flintlock carbines, the Kajori somehow held the Death Guard at bay for nearly 6 solar months. Mortarion later revealed that the Kajori possessed psychic abilities and fought alongside mysterious unseen allies. This campaign left a lasting impression on Mortarion, reinforcing his deep hatred of sorcery and the use of psychic powers. He would later cite the horrors of the Kajor campaign during the Council of Nicaea as evidence of the dangers of witchcraft and his belief in its complete eradication. Around the same time, the Imperium faced one of its largest orc threats yet, an immense orc war fleet led by Overdog Mashog. This force required a joint compliance campaign by the Space Wolves, White Scars, and Iron Warriors. Leman Russ and Jagatai Khan earned great renown for their ferocity in routing Mashog's forces, while Perturabo of the Iron Warriors, though crucial to the campaign's success, received little recognition. His calculated strategies had ensured the bypassing of Mashog's low-orbit defenses, but the credit for victory went to Russ and Khan. To Perturabo, this perceived slight added to his growing resentment toward the Emperor and his brothers, fueling the bitterness that would fester for years. The mid-800s of the 30th millennium also saw the compliance of the Iraqi Spiral, another campaign that further strained Perturabo's patience. The Iraqites, skilled fortress builders, had dug their strongholds into natural barriers and narrow passes, forcing the Imperium into a grueling war of attrition. The Iron Warriors, tasked with the brutal siege warfare necessary to overcome these defenses, had suffered devastating losses. The The campaign dragged on for years, and while victory was eventually achieved, the toll on the Fourth Legion was immense. When the conflict ended, great works of art and poetry celebrated the courage and heroism of the other legions involved, such as the White Scars and the Imperial Fists. The Iron Warriors, however, were largely ignored. In one notable painting, the Iron Warriors were reduced to the background, depicted as an apothecary harvesting the gene seed of a dying brother while the flag of the Imperial Fists flew over a captured fortress. Perturabo, infuriated by this perceived insult, sought out the artist and purchased the piece, only to burn it in front of the horrified artisan. "If my sons are not to be honored," he declared, "then they will not be a part of a record that glorifies another." Rogel Dorn later offered to commission a revised version of the work, but the artist wisely refused. In the mid-800s of the 30th millennium, the Imperium faced a strange and costly conflict known as the Two Wars of Arrhenius. The Arrhenius continuity, a series of interconnected worlds near the Sol system, had maintained their unity through the use of ancient warp gates of unknown origin. The continuity was ruled by a technobility caste from Arrhenius Prime, the central hub of the warp gate network. When an Imperial squadron accidentally jumped through one of the gates, they were boarded and overrun by cybernetically grafted warriors. In response, the Emperor sent an envoy fleet to demand fealty from the continuity. The technobility refused, arrogantly inviting the Emperor to join their empire as a tributary instead. For this insult, the Imperial Fists were tasked with bringing the continuity to compliance. Commander Hashin Yonad of the Imperial Fists' 39th Household launched a devastating assault that systematically dismantled the continuity's network. Within 2 solar months, their empire was reduced to a single stronghold, Arrhenius Prime. Victory was within the Imperium's grasp when an unknown menace emerged from one of the warp gates. The new threat devastated 6 star systems of the continuity, creating widespread destruction. Overwhelmed and with few options, Yonad made the difficult decision to destroy the warp gates, cutting off the menace but costing the lives of thousands of Imperial Fists and billions of humans. Arrhenius Prime survived, but as a ruined world. The Imperium renamed the scorched planet Necromunda, a stark reminder of the devastation wrought during the campaign. Around the same time, the Warhounds Legion undertook the compliance of the Nova Shendak system. This campaign saw the 12th Legion face a strange and intelligent xenospecies that had enslaved 3-star systems. The creatures, known for embedding themselves with metallic filaments to generate devastating bioelectric attacks, were driven back by the Warhounds and their allies in the Imperial Army and the Iron Warriors Legion. When the campaign reached the Xenos' homeworld of Nova Shendak, the Warhounds made an unexpected discovery: a population of humans living alongside their oppressors. With the Emperor personally leading his Warhounds into battle, the Xenos emerged from their subterranean nests for a final stand. Though the casualties were immense, the 12th Legion triumphed, exterminating the Xenos and liberating the enslaved humans. The people of Nova Shendak, grateful for their freedom, became devoted supporters of the Imperium. In 857, the Emperor rediscovered another of his lost sons, Lorgar Aurelian, on the theocratic world of Colchis. Lorgar had risen to power as the Archpriest of the Covenant, a religion that worshipped a savior deity described in terms uncannily similar to the Emperor. When the Great Crusade reached Colchis, Lorgar welcomed the Emperor with great ceremony, proclaiming him as the long-prophesied god of Colchisian faith. Despite the Emperor's insistence that he was no god and that worship violated the imperial truth, Lorgar continued to spread his religious zeal across the galaxy. Taking command of the 17th Legion, which he renamed the Wordbearers, Lorgar began reshaping the Legion in his image. His odd devotion to faith, however, set him apart from his brothers, many of whom viewed him as one of the weaker Primarchs. The newly reunited Wordbearers soon found themselves tasked with the purging of Arakiana, a compliance mission against the cult of the Iconoclast. This dark religion, based on the worship of a one true god, eerily similar to the Emperor, was eradicated in a bloody campaign. Despite the destruction of the cult, its teachings influenced Lorgar deeply, and elements of their tenets were incorporated into an early version of the Book of Lorgar, a foundational text for his legion. In 865, the Imperium launched a major compliance campaign in the Renomar system against the Orc war fleet of the Over-Tyrant of Grell. The system was already under siege by the Death Guard and Space Wolves when Rogel Dorn and the Imperial Fists arrived to reinforce the effort. Dorn, alongside Captain Archimus and 10,000 Imperial Fists, constructed heavy bulwarks on the surface of Renomar. The Orcs, as expected, threw themselves against these defenses in wave after wave of futile assaults. With the enemy drawn into this trap, the Space Marines counterattacked and annihilated the Greenskin forces, securing the system for the Imperium. The same year, the Emperor reunited with Jagatai Khan on the feral world of Chogoris. The Great Khan had conquered his world with a nomadic army of steppe horsemen, uniting the planet under his rule. When the Emperor arrived with the Great Crusade's Principia Imperialis expeditionary fleet, Khan faced a choice: submission or annihilation. Choosing loyalty, Jagatai pledged his sword to the Imperium and took command of the 5th Legion, which he named the White Scars. Under his leadership, the White Scars became masters of lightning-fast warfare, favoring hit-and-run tactics over prolonged engagements. In 866, the Great Crusade reached the Grail Library on the world of Riobia. Guarded by self-proclaimed warlocks, the library was filled with proscribed works of great psychic and arcane power. Refusing to surrender its secrets to the Imperium, the warlocks defied the imperial truth. The 19th Legion, tasked with the compliance of the system, moved to destroy the psychic threat. However, before they could act, a passing fleet of the Thousand Sons Legion had already intervened and dealt with the warlocks. The Grail Library was destroyed, but its secrets, both dangerous and invaluable, were left to Magnus the Red and his legion. The mid-800s of the 30th millennium were a time of dramatic expansion and costly struggles for the Imperium. Each campaign brought new victories and discoveries, but also deeper challenges as the galaxy's complexity and dangers revealed themselves. In 869, the compliance of the night world of Molech marked one of the most significant and mysterious events of the Great Crusade. Molech, a world steeped in ancient history and secrets, was brought into the Imperium's fold through a massive joint compliance campaign involving multiple Space Marine legions. Following their victory, the Emperor named Cyprian Divine of House Divine as the world's planetary governor. However, it was what lay hidden beneath Molech's surface that made this compliance particularly important. In the presence of several of his Primarch sons, the Emperor led a small group to a warp gate located on Molech. This ancient portal, a relic of humanity's golden age of technology, served as a direct gateway to the realm of chaos. The Emperor passed through the portal, entering the immaterial dimension of the warp to parley with the ruinous powers themselves. When he returned, the Emperor appeared visibly aged but vastly more powerful. To preserve the secret of Molech and its warp gate, he psychically suppressed the memories of his sons who had witnessed the event. He then established a massive garrison force to guard the world, leaving nearly 100 regiments of Imperialis Auxilia, 3 cohorts of the Legio Titanicus, and detachments from 2 Space Marine legions to ensure that Molech and its secrets remained under Imperial control. Between 839 and 890, the Imperium waged the Rangdan Xenocides, one of the most harrowing campaigns of the Great Crusade. The Dark Angels, supported by the Titans of the Legio Graphonicus, Legio Vulturum, and Legio Kidianos, fought against a Xenos menace that emerged from the edge of the Halo stars. Known as the Rangdan, these aliens posed an existential threat to the Imperium. Over the course of 3 brutal campaigns, culminating in the 3rd Rangdan Xenocide around 890, the Imperium lost tens of thousands of Space Marines, including 50,000 during the final conflict alone. Despite the high cost, the campaign prevented the destruction of the Northern Imperium. However, the Dark Angels were left severely depleted, paving the way for the Ultramarines to become the largest Space Marine Legion, with their numbers swelling to 166,000 by 899. In 876, the feudal world of Zavarich, located within the Cyclops cluster, was brought into compliance. This campaign was remarkable for its peaceful nature, as the world's leadership willingly joined the Imperium. By the time of the Horus Heresy, Zavarich had transitioned into a fully operational agri-world, becoming one of the few such planets in the region, critical to feeding Imperial forces. The late 800s saw other grim trials, such as the Majin Tor transgression. During the Second Rangdan Xenocide, a base mechanic bark carrying a dormant macro beast broke through the cordon of the galactic northeast and crashed into Majin. The Death Guard Legion, tasked with pursuing the bark, suffered heavy losses when the macro beast was reactivated by unknown means. Only the swift intervention of the 6th Legion, the Space Wolves, prevented a catastrophic disaster. In 891, the Mechanicum of Griffon IV, alongside their Legio Griffonicus Titans, faced an unknown Xenos threat known as the Hungering Gyre. This campaign, fought with tremendous sacrifice, ended in victory for the Imperium. In recognition of their efforts, the Emperor granted the Forge World of Griffon IV dominion over Paramar V and its valuable industrial facilities. That same year, the world of Lascal was discovered on the edge of the Grail Abyss by the Dark Angel's 7th Expeditionary Fleet under Lord Commander Suleiman Grimm. Previously a feral orc holding, Lascal had been cleansed by the Dark Angels and later became a forward outpost of the Great Crusade. Over the following decades, Lascal developed into a thriving imperial colony, complete with an orbital fleet anchorage constructed by the Lucian Mechanicum. Another discovery of note in 891 was the dead world of Grail, found by rogue trader Corthona van der Velde. Named for its desolate and eerie nature, Grail became the namesake of the Grail Abyss, a region infamous for its hidden wealth and dangers. Over time, the Grail Abyss drew countless explorators and treasure hunters, many of whom met their end amid its treacherous void. In 896, the Emperor rediscovered Conrad Kurz, his 8th lost son, on the perpetually dark and sunless world of Nostromo. Known as the Night Haunter, Kurz had ruled Nostromo through sheer terror, enforcing brutal justice on the planet's corrupt population. Plagued by precognitive visions, Kurz foresaw the Emperor's arrival long before it occurred. When the Emperor descended alongside several of his Primarch sons, including Magnus the Red, Rogaldorn, and Fulgrim, Kurz experienced a vision so horrific that he attempted to claw out his own eyes. Despite his anguish, he pledged loyalty to the Emperor and was granted command of the 8th Legion. Kurz reshaped the 8th Legion into the Night Lords, a force specializing in the use of fear as a weapon. Under his leadership, the Night Lords carried out campaigns of terror designed to bring compliance through dread and submission. Kurz's methods, while effective, disturbed many of his brothers and marked him as one of the most unsettling figures among the Primarchs. In 899, the Xenocide of the Osiran Cybrids unfolded on the southwestern edge of the Great Crusade's frontier near the Eurytus Terminal. A subfleet of the 12th Legion under the command of Praetor Erad Krug was locked in fierce combat against the Orc Raiders of the so-called Glortian Empire, a brutal greenskin force from the uncharted abyss beyond Imperial space. As the Warhounds and Orcs clashed, a mysterious third party entered the fray, the Osiran Cybrids, a nightmarishly powerful Xenos species. Using advanced teleportation technology, the Cybrids boarded both Orc and Imperial vessels. Only the savage resilience of the Warhounds allowed them to survive the initial onslaught, though they lost dozens of void ships. The Cybrids destroyed hundreds of Orc vessels, spreading devastation across the battlefield. The Primarch of the Ultramarines, learning of the Cybrid attack, ordered the Warhounds to hold their position and, if possible, track the Cybrids back to their source. The Ultramarines dispatched a powerful retribution fleet to reinforce the Warhounds at the Eurytus Terminal. Together, the two legions launched a relentless counter-offensive. The Ultramarines, determined to avenge their near defeat during the Osiris Rebellion 6 decades earlier, systematically eradicated the Cybrids and their enslaved armies. Once the Cybrids were destroyed, their slave armies also collapsed, leaving the Ultramarines and Warhounds free to wipe out the remaining Glordian Orcs. Though the blood price was steep, the Imperium emerged victorious, ensuring that the Osiran Cybrids would never again threaten humanity. The same year, the Emperor arrived on the brutal world of Nuceria, where he found his lost son, the Primarch Angron Thalkir. Angron, known as the Lord of the Red Sands, had been sold into slavery as a young adolescent and subjected to horrific surgery that implanted the butcher's nails, barbaric cranial devices that heightened his aggression while dulling his higher functions. Forced to fight in the gladiatorial pits for the entertainment of Nuceria's rulers, Angron quickly rose to the top. On the eve of the largest gladiatorial event ever held, he led a successful slave revolt, freeing his fellow gladiators and retreating into the Dacia Mountains. Angron and his comrades prepared for a final stand against their oppressors. On the night before the battle, Angron dug his own grave, intending to die alongside his brothers and sisters in the name of freedom. However, the Emperor intervened, teleporting Angron aboard his flagship before the battle could take place. Enraged that his comrades were left to die, Angron swore never to forgive the Emperor for denying him the honor of dying with his kin. Taken to Terra, Angron was examined and then introduced to his genetic sons, the Warhounds of the 12th Legion. Upon assuming command, Angron remade the Legion in his own image, transforming them into the World Eaters. Their tactics became even more brutal and bloody, mirroring the fury of their Primarch. Around 900, a significant ideological shift began to take root on Terra with the establishment of the Temple of the Savior Emperor. A decorated imperial army officer taking the name Fatidicus, meaning prophet, secretly found the temple to worship the emperor as the god of humanity. This heretical movement violated the atheistic tenets of the imperial truth, yet it began to spread through the ranks of the imperial army and was bolstered by other cults, such as the Lectitio Divinitatis. Over time, this religious belief would expand across the newborn Imperium, sowing seeds of faith that would later shape humanity's view of the Emperor. The early 900s also saw the assault on Dulin, a campaign that reignited tensions between the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels. On the world of Dulin, the tyrant Durath had defied the Imperium, sacrificing thousands of envoys to his patron Daemon and insulting the Emperor himself. Both Leman Russ and Lion L. Johnson sought the honor of slaying the tyrant. When Durath insulted Russ directly, the Primarch of the Space Wolves demanded the right to lead the attack. However, Johnson ignored Russ's demand and instead launched a precise assault on the tyrant's fortress, killing Durath personally. After the battle, Russ confronted Johnson, and the two Primarchs fought a legendary duel that lasted an entire solar day and night. Russ eventually stopped fighting, seeing the humor in their quarrel, but Johnson, still furious, knocked Russ unconscious before departing to the Allosaur campaign. Russ swore vengeance, and to this day, whenever the Space Wolves and Dark Angels meet, their warriors reenact the duel between their Primarchs in a ritual combat designed to settle the grudge. The events of 899 and the early 900s of the 30th millennium showcase the Imperium's unrelenting drive to expand and overcome all obstacles. Yet they also revealed the fractures forming within the Emperor's great vision. Fractures born of unresolved grudges, ideological rebellion, and the irrepressible fury of humanity's darker nature. In the early 900s, the compliance of Tarsus saw the Ultramarines Legion bring the world of Tarsus into the Imperial fold. During the campaign, the Primarch of the Ultramarines was attacked by a mysterious assailant, but was saved by a native soldier of Tarsus. In an extraordinary display of humility, the Primarch knelt before the soldier and swore a warrior's oath that the Ultramarines would come to the aid of Tarsus should the need ever arise. In gratitude, the planet renamed itself Tarsus Ultra and honored the Ultramarines with the creation of the Tarsus Fresco, an enormous mosaic painted within a temple in the capital city of Erebus. This intricate artwork depicted the events of the Great Crusade, immortalizing the bond between the people of Tarsus and the legion that had saved them. The Night Lords, supported by the Titan legions Legio Volcanum I, Dark Fire, and Legio Volcanum II, carried out the infamous Shehugal Purge during the same period. This campaign of xenocide eradicated the Shehugal dominion in an act of unparalleled fury and brutality. The Purge such a deep mark on history that it became a legend of the Great Crusade, remembered even in the shadow of Horus's betrayal and the cataclysmic events that followed. The Luna Wolves were also active during this time, conducting the compliance of Tethonus. Fighting against an unidentified Xenos adversary, the campaign became a drawn-out siege of fortress states scattered across the planet's surface. To overcome these formidable defenses, Horus tasked the Forge world of Diamat with crafting enormous continental Ordinei siege engines. However, the war machines were completed far too late, over a standard year and a half after the compliance had already been achieved. These siege engines were placed in storage on Diamat, where they would remain until Horus's rebellion. Decades later, the War Master sent his raiding forces to claim the weapons for his campaign against the Emperor, cementing their role in the dark history of the Horus heresy. Elsewhere, the Luna Wolves faced another challenge on the world of Dahinta. Here, they fought against a race of self-aware machines known as the Overseers, led by an artificial general intelligence referred to as the Archdroid. These sentient machines violated one of the Emperor's most ancient edicts, the prohibition of artificial intelligence, which had nearly caused humanity's extinction during the Dark Age of technology. Despite heavy casualties, the Luna Wolves eradicated the Overseers, wiping them from existence. Only after the battle did the truth emerge. The Overseers had been created by a long-vanished offshoot of humanity, who had likely settled Dahinta during the Age of Technology. For centuries, these machines had maintained the crumbling cities of their extinct or departed masters, a tragic legacy swept away by the Imperium's zeal. Around this same time, the Alpha Legion executed several notable compliance actions. On the world designated 529, they brought an unknown adversary to heel. Another joint campaign, conducted alongside the gene-engineered Geno 760 Spartacid Regiment of the Imperial Army, brought the Farronus worlds into compliance. The Geno 760 played a critical role, their legendary discipline and fearlessness aiding the Alpha Legion in overcoming the system's defenders. The Alpha Legion also partnered with the Death Guard during the compliance of the Thorium Abominoplex. Though the details of this campaign remain sparse, records indicate it was a grueling operation against an unrecorded adversary. During the same period, the Imperium launched the xenocide of Kamenka Troika, targeting the barbaric orcs of the Kamenka Troika system. The Emperor personally issued the writs of war, commanding the Thousand Sons, the Legio Astorum Titan Legion, and a life host of Panpak Eugenians from the Imperial Army to eradicate the greenskin threat. The war was a grinding conflict fought across 3 satellite planets of Kamenka Ulazarna, a world claimed by the Mechanicum of Mars. After 2 standard years of relentless combat, the orcs were defeated, but the cost was steep. Tens of thousands lay dead, and the Thousand Sons suffered catastrophic losses, including 873 battle brothers of the Fifth Fellowship. The devastation forced Magnus the Red to reorganize his legion, reducing it from 10 fellowships to 9, mirroring the classical Pesaget of Prosperine antiquity. These campaigns exemplified the Imperium's tireless expansion during the Great Crusade, but they also showcased the staggering toll of war, both in lives lost and legacies altered forever. The price of progress was one the Imperium continued to pay in blood. In 902, the Iron Warriors undertook the brutal subjugation of Kaldorak's Aleph. The campaign was prosecuted by the 118th and 3rd Grand Battalions, which suffered devastating losses with nearly 65% of their forces wiped out. Despite the staggering cost, the Iron Warriors succeeded in utterly crushing the non-compliant forces of the Defiant World. Victory was achieved, but the high blood price was a grim testament to the Iron Warriors' unyielding commitment to the Emperor's cause. The same year saw the Emperor's children defending the ancient crystalline gates of tranquility in the Dalanite Nebula. These gates, claimed by the Imperium, became the focus of an intense battle when an unknown Xenos fleet emerged from them. The 3rd Legion ultimately overcame the Xenos attackers, driving them back through the gates and securing the vital region for the Great Crusade. Around this time, the Word-Bearers brought the world of Kur into Imperial compliance. Under their direction, the people of Kur constructed the city of Monarchia, called the Perfect City, as a tribute to the god Emperor. This event, occurring roughly a century before the Istvan III atrocity, would later play a significant role in the Word-Bearers' history. In the early 900s, the World Eaters unleashed their fury on the Golgotha sector, their first campaign following Angron's ascension as their Primarch. The campaign began with the Siege of Sarum, where the World Eaters fought to liberate the Forge world of Sarum from the Abhuman Empire, known as the Brotherhood of Ruin. This empire had besieged Sarum to claim the Mechanicum's technological secrets. Angron and his legions slaughtered the Brotherhood's forces with brutal efficiency, earning the loyalty of the Redjack tech priests. These Mechanicum allies pledged to supply the World Eaters with weapons and armor, forming a valuable partnership outside the Imperium's inner sphere. The World Eaters' campaign in the Golgotha sector continued for 11 years, during which they devastated 48 worlds and exterminated 7 Xenos species, including a branch of the man-eating Lacrimol. The liberation of Alpha Shalish was among their notable victories, where the 203rd Expeditionary Fleet cleansed the Lacrimol-infested world with merciless precision. The righteous fury of the World Eaters was recorded in detail by remembrancers and artist scribes accompanying the fleet. However, as the Great Crusade progressed, whispers of discontent began to surround Angron and his legion. These murmurs grew louder following the infamous Genna massacre, in which the World Eaters annihilated the entire population of Genna in a single night after the planet rebelled against its imperial commander. Angron's apothecarion had also begun widespread psychosurgery, implanting the butcher's nails into his space marines. The psychic screams of the dying during the Genna massacre were said to be audible to astropaths half a sector away, cementing Angron's reputation for savagery and madness. The Emperor, deeply concerned, dispatched Leman Russ and the Space Wolves to confront Angron. This event, later known as the Night of the Wolf, saw Russ attempt to reason with his blood-maddened brother and deliver the Emperor's decree to end the use of prohibited psychosurgery. Angron, however, refused to listen. Tensions escalated until a melee broke out between the two legions. Recognizing the catastrophic consequences of continued fighting, Russ ordered his legion to withdraw, choosing prudence over mutual annihilation. Following this confrontation, the World Eaters were exiled to the northern fringes of known space, tasked with waging war against Xenos far from the Imperium's core worlds. This exile was a pragmatic decision to harness their savagery without risking harm to civilian populations. In 921, the Luna Wolves fought the grueling Kelek genocide. On the world of Kelek, the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet encountered the hostile reptilian Kelekid, a species skilled in combat and fanatically opposed to the Imperium. The campaign proved to be a bloody, drawn-out affair, with the Luna Wolves forced to endure relentless attrition in order to achieve victory. The early 900s of the 30th millennium were marked by brutal campaigns, desperate defenses, and the growing shadow of division among the Emperor's sons. The flames of conquest continued to burn, but beneath them the seeds of future conflicts were quietly taking root. In 921, the world of Korkosan, long thought lost to the warp, suddenly re-emerged on the immaterial tides of the Messier 16 Nebula. A century earlier, the planet had been brought into Imperial compliance, only to vanish into the warp soon after. Upon its reappearance, Korkosan seemed to have experienced time in reverse. Its ruins, thought ancient, appeared restored, providing Imperial scholars and Mechanicum adepts with tantalizing clues about humanity's earliest ventures into the stars during the Dark Age of technology. In 922, the Emperor discovered his next lost son, Corvus Corax, on the mine moon of Lycius. Raised by prisoners enslaved by the nearby world of Kievar, Corax led a revolution against their oppressors and renamed his home Deliverance. The Emperor arrived with the Principia Imperialis fleet and held a private conversation with Corax that lasted an entire solar day and night. Afterward, Corax was left to conquer Kievar alone, a task he completed with surgical precision. Upon reuniting with the Emperor, Corax took command of the 19th Legion, transforming them into the Raven Guard and instilling them with his own emphasis on stealth, precision, and devastating strikes. In 927, the Alpha Legion undertook the Cryptosi Purgation. This secretive campaign targeted a bizarre Xeno species, possibly later identified as the Cryptosi, in the northern reaches of the galaxy. The Alpha Legion was sent to investigate atrocities committed by these metadimensional entities, but the details remain shrouded in mystery. Contact with human colonies in the region was lost after the operation, suggesting widespread devastation, but few official records of the campaign exist. The same year, records mention a discovery, but all details have been redacted and expunged from the Imperial archives. The identity of the Primarch or event tied to this entry remains unknown, leaving only speculation in its place. In 933, the Iron Warriors' 33rd Grand Battalion launched the 3rd Tempora Ferox Extermination, a xenocide campaign against the Tempora Ferox species. The campaign was marked by staggering losses. 78% of the battalion perished, but the Iron Warriors' High Command deemed the casualties an acceptable cost to achieve complete annihilation of the Xenos threat. In 939, the rebellious world of Novo Andros became the site of a mysterious intervention. A force identifying itself as the Ghost Legion appeared unexpectedly and quelled a psychic phenomenon that had thrown the planet into chaos. The conflict was brief and bloody, ending with Novo Andros' return to compliance. However, the involvement of the enigmatic Ghost Legion deepened the superstitions surrounding this shadowed force. In 941, the Luna Wolves brought the feral world of Davin into Imperial compliance. Impressed by the courage and adaptability of the Davinite warrior tribes, Horus allowed their society to remain mostly intact. The Davinites introduced the Luna Wolves to the concept of the Warrior Lodge, a tradition that rapidly spread throughout the fleet. A detachment of the Word Bearers, then called the Imperial Heralds, under the command of First Captain Corferon, was left to guide the Davinites toward the Imperial truth. Commander Eugen Temba of the Imperial Army, a close ally of Horus, was appointed as Davin's planetary governor. In 942, the world of Gethsemane was accidentally discovered by Imperial merchant fleet captains near the Cyclops cluster. The planet, a lush and untouched paradise of steaming rainforests devoid of animal life, was quickly identified as a prime location for human colonization. Warp arcs transported teeming populations from the Segmentum Solar to settle the world. Gethsemane became a cornerstone for Imperial expansion into the surrounding stars, symbolizing humanity's relentless drive to claim the galaxy. In 943, the Word-Bearers brought the world of Melkaji into Imperial compliance during an event remembered as the Melkaji Salvation. The human population of Melkaji had been subjugated by a parasitic alien race known as the Ascended, which feasted on human sentience. The Word-Bearers stormed the strongholds of the parasite hosts and annihilated them, liberating the population and restoring the world to Imperial rule. Around 945, the Dark Angels, as part of the 4th Expeditionary Fleet, reached the planet Sarosh, officially codified as Sigma 51-7. The Saroshi rulers had expressed a desire to join the Imperium and appeared to follow the materialist doctrines of the Imperial truth. However, unbeknownst to the Imperials, the Saroshi secretly worship chaotic entities from the warp, referred to as the Melakim. The Lord High Exactor, the Saroshi leader, confronted Lion L. Johnson aboard the Dark Angel's flagship, openly denouncing the Emperor and the Primarch. Johnson responded by running the fanatical leader through with his lion's sword. However, the Saroshi had hidden a nuclear device aboard their shuttle, intending to assassinate Johnson and the command structure of the Dark Angel's fleet. Thanks to the actions of Luther and a young librarian named Zahariel, the shuttle was ejected into space, causing only minor damage to the flagship. Despite this, Johnson viewed their failure to prevent the breach as a disgrace. Luther, Zahariel, and 500 other Dark Angels were sent back to Caliban as punishment, tasked with overseeing recruitment of new Space Marines from the Calibanite population. During this period, the Raven Guard undertook the Carinae Retribution, a dark chapter in their history. Assigned to pacify the 1,000 moons of Carinae, vast void cities orbiting a planet less primary, the campaign saw the use of a horrific weapon by the Arch-Comptroller of one such moon, designated Zenith 3112. This weapon, an animaphage of terrifying potency, reduced ordinary humans and mortal soldiers of the Imperial Army into mindless, ravenous creatures driven only by rage. While the Raven Guard's Space Marines were immune due to their genetically enhanced physiology, they were forced to kill their former allies, including the once loyal mortal soldiers, to end the threat. Corvus Corax personally hunted down the Arch-Comptroller and exacted brutal revenge. However, in their focus on vengeance, the Raven Guard neglected to suppress the other moons of Carinae, allowing the defenders to fortify. What should have been a swift compliance campaign dragged on for 7 solar months, costing thousands of additional Imperial lives. At the edge of the Dominion of Storms to the galactic east, the stellar empire of Gardenal posed a significant challenge to the Great Crusade. Comprised of 11 inhabited worlds, the Gardenal were a militarily powerful civilization. Initial diplomatic efforts led by an honor guard of the Thousand Suns began well. However, the Gardenal lords attempted a psychic subversion of the Imperial emissaries, forcing the Ultramarines' 413th Expeditionary Fleet, commanded by Master Ulan Cicerus of the 15th Chapter, to intervene militarily. Despite early gains, the Ultramarines were stalled by the formidable defenses of Gardenal Prime, which featured advanced STC-based weaponry and vehicles never before encountered by the Imperium. A blockade of the system was initiated, but it was only broken when reinforcements arrived in the form of war hosts from the Iron Hands and the Emperor's Children. The Emperor's Children launched a diversionary assault, while the Iron Hands conducted a relentless system-wide campaign, dismantling the Gardenal Empire piece by piece. Eager to reclaim their honor, the Ultramarines requested the honor of leading the final assault on the Gardenal capital city, paying a steep blood price for the victory. Once the Gardenal rulers were crushed, the remaining worlds surrendered unconditionally. Though initially devastated by famine and hardship, the system was swiftly rebuilt and became a model of imperial compliance, contributing greatly to the Imperium's resources and stability. In the later years of the Great Crusade, the Imperial Fists achieved a major victory against an orc horde on the ash wastes of the Hive world of Necromunda. Following this triumph, the Hive Lords of Necromunda, in gratitude, allowed the Imperial Fists to recruit from their population. A fortress chapel was consecrated to mark the alliance, but true to their principles, the Imperial Fists refused to claim any special political or economic rights on Necromunda or any other world from which they recruited. Throughout the Great Crusade, the Imperial Fists remained resolute in their commitment to serve purely as a military force, declining the responsibilities of ruling a single homeworld or managing its mortal population. Around the same time, the Death Guard and the Luna Wolves joined forces in the Crypt Persecution, a brutal compliance action against orcs on the frozen plains of the planet Crypt. For more than a solar week, the combined forces of the two legions turned the planet's blue ice dark with Xeno's blood. Among those leading the charge were the Death Guard's battle captain Nathaniel Garrow and the Luna Wolves' Captain Garviel Loken, whose companies fought side by side during the campaign. One of the most momentous engagements of the era was the Battle of Gyros Thravian, a joint Imperial compliance action carried out by the Luna Wolves, Death Guard, and Imperial Fists against the formidable orc warboss Garkul Blackfang. Blackfang was one of the most powerful orc warlords encountered during the Great Crusade, and even with the combined might of 3 Space Marine legions, the Imperium was on the verge of defeat. The tide of battle turned only when the Emperor himself arrived aboard his flagship, Bucephalus, accompanied by his Principia Imperialis fleet. Leading a force of 1,000 custodians, the Emperor personally descended into the heart of the orc horde. Blackfang was confronted and slain atop his Gargant by the Emperor, while the Custodian Guard devastated the orc forces. In a feat of unmatched combat prowess, the Custodians slaughtered over 100,000 greenskins, while losing only 3 of their own. To honor their sacrifice, the Emperor engraved the names of the 3 fallen Custodians into his own personal artificer armor, a testament to their valor and loyalty. In 954, the Ultramarines were drawn to the planet Volturn, known as the Screaming World, after their legion's librarians claimed to hear inhuman screams emanating from its location. Initially thought to already be under Imperial compliance, Volturn was found to be infested with ill-defined Xenos entities. Tragically, all members of the Ultramarines' landing party succumbed to fatal cerebral aneurysms within minutes of setting foot on the planet. Volturn was subsequently quarantined and abandoned, marked as a cursed world by the Imperium. By 962, the Iron Warriors' 282nd Grand Battalion successfully conducted the pacification of the Sarian Compact, reducing rebellious garrison forces to only 30% effective strength. However, despite the strategic victory, the battalion's command was censured by the Iron Warriors' High Command for a perceived lack of zeal due to the relatively modest 32% casualty rate sustained during the campaign. This incident highlighted the Iron Warriors' harsh internal expectations for their warriors to fully embrace sacrifice in pursuit of victory. That same year, the defense of Helioret saw the combined might of the Blood Angels Legion and the Ordo Sinister bring an end to a brutal campaign of Eldari raids orchestrated by the insane witch idol of the craft world Mag Sithral. The Eldari had committed etheric outrages across the sector, terrorizing the population of Helioret. In a climactic battle, the forces of the Blood Angels and the Ordo Sinister destroyed the witch idol and cast the entire craft world into the local star, ending its threat once and for all. The Great Crusade continued to bring humanity into dominance over the stars, but the cost of victory in both blood and moral compromise grew with each passing solar year. In 964, the Emperor delivered a crushing rebuke to the Word-Bearers Legion in an event known as the Raising of Monarchia. Monarchia, the capital city of the planet Kur, had been built by the Word-Bearers as a magnificent shrine to the Emperor, whom they worshipped as a god. However, their devotion directly contradicted the atheistic doctrines of the imperial truth, which forbade any form of religious worship. To punish the Word-Bearers for this transgression, the Ultramarines Legion, under the Emperor's orders, destroyed Monarchia and its so-called false temples. The Emperor himself arrived and used his psychic might to force the entirety of the Word-Bearers Legion, including their Primarch, Lorgar, to kneel in the ashes of the city they had revered. The Ultramarines stood over them in judgment as the Emperor denounced their worship as heresy. What the Word-Bearers had seen as an act of devotion was now labeled treasonous, leaving them humiliated and seething with resentment. This public disgrace planted the seeds of heresy within their hearts, a wound that would fester until it drove the Word-Bearers into the arms of the ruinous powers. The very next year, in 965, the Word-Bearers brought the world designated 4716 into imperial compliance. However, this campaign bore the mark of the corruption now spreading within the 17th Legion. Despite the population's initial rejoicing at being reunited with their long-lost kin from the stars, the Word-Bearers launched a brutal orbital bombardment that annihilated nearly every city on the planet, sparing only one. Lorgar justified this genocidal act by claiming there was no time to convert the population to the imperial truth, and that their beliefs were incompatible with the Imperium's materialist order. Ironically, the people of 4716 had worshipped the Emperor as a god, guided by a copy of the Lectitio Divinitatis, a holy text written by Lorgar himself. Yet the Word-Bearers condemned them to death, dismissing their worship as ignorance and heresy. This act of hypocrisy solidified the Word-Bearers' fall from grace and their growing divergence from the Emperor's vision. Later that same year, an event occurred that remains shrouded in secrecy. All records of this incident, which seemingly involved the Space Wolves Legion, have been redacted from Imperial archives, leaving only fragmented mentions of its existence. In 966, the Word-Bearers made a discovery that would change the fate of the galaxy. During their pilgrimage of Lorgar, a spiritual quest to uncover the truths of the universe, the 17th Legion found the Cadia system near the Eye of Terror, the largest permanent warp storm in the galaxy. There, on the world they designated as 1301-12, the Word-Bearers encountered a human population that openly worshipped chaos. It was on Cadia that Lorgar met Ingethal, a demon prince of chaos, who became his guide into the worship of the ruinous powers. Lorgar's naive faith was exploited, and he was inducted into the service of chaos, setting the stage for the catastrophic events of the Horus Heresy, which would erupt less than 4 decades later. Around the same time, the Dark Angels were engaged in the Battle of Byzanthus, a tragic and fractious campaign that highlighted internal divisions within the First Legion. A Dark Angels expeditionary fleet, commanded by Chapter Master Merir Astalon, discovered the distant world of Byzanthus during their exploration of star system DX6119. Soon after, another Dark Angels force, led by Chapter Master Beloth, arrived to assist. However, tensions flared between the two commanders, who advocated drastically different approaches to bringing Byzantium into compliance. Astalon favored diplomacy, while Baloth insisted on military action. When hostilities erupted between the Dark Angels and the Byzantium defense forces, Astalon sought to negotiate with the planetary government, pleading for them to accept the imperial truth and join the Imperium peacefully. Baloth, however, had no patience for diplomacy. He teleported into the negotiations with a Terminator retinue and slaughtered the Byzantium delegation, leaving Astalon enraged. With war now inevitable, a bloody campaign ensued, ultimately forcing Byzantium into compliance. Though successful, the campaign became a point of contention within the First Legion, reflecting the growing fractures among the Primarchs and their sons as the Great Crusade progressed. In 969, an event occurred that remains shrouded in secrecy. All data concerning this incident has been redacted, with only scattered fragments suggesting the involvement of the Space Wolves Legion. In 970, the world of Zaramund was brought into imperial compliance through a joint campaign led by the Luna Wolves, the Death Guard under First Captain Callus Typhon, and the Dark Angels under the command of Luther, acting regent of Caliban. Following the victory, a grand celebration was held among the imperial forces. However, the revelry was interrupted when Lyon L. Johnson arrived to publicly rebuke Luther for disobeying his direct orders to remain on Caliban. The tension between the two leaders deepened, foreshadowing the eventual fracturing of the Dark Angels Legion. In 972, another unknown event transpired, involving both the Night Lords and Raven Guard legions. All data regarding this campaign, referred to as the Ferronatus extermination, has been fully redacted, leaving its details a mystery. By 977, the Raven Guard carried out the Bregshai eradication on the world of Ferronatus Maximus. This operation was executed in tandem with the Night Lords, targeting the insectoid xenospecies known as the Bregshai. The Raven Guard infiltration team, led by Sergeant Dravian Clade, was tasked with collapsing the Bregshai's nest. Tragically, Clade's team was discovered and annihilated, leaving Clade as the sole survivor. Severely injured, with one arm and both legs lost, Clade dragged himself back to Imperial lines over the course of solar days, earning the grim moniker the Carrion from the Night Lords who found him. Clade's resilience led to his extensive augmetic reconstruction and eventual selection for training as a tech marine on Mars. He would later play a significant role during the Schism of Mars, shaping the history of both the Raven Guard and the Mechanicum. That same year, the Ultramarines brought the world of Dwell into Imperial compliance under the command of Guilliman. Dwell, settled during the Dark Age of technology, was found to house a network of esoteric technologies capable of preserving and combining the memories and knowledge of its people after death. This repository of knowledge would later prove vital to events far beyond the Great Crusade, influencing Horus's path to chaos during the heresy. In the late 970s, the Night Lords were tasked with the persecution of the Githora warp witches across the Valmir reaches. This protracted campaign targeted rogue alpha-level psychers who threatened to reveal the truth of chaos and undermine the Emperor's imperial truth. Acting under the Emperor's edict, the Night Lords conducted extermination operations, either from orbit or through direct confrontation, to prevent these warp witches from spreading their forbidden knowledge. In 981, the Alpha Legion was finally reunited with its enigmatic Primarch, Alpharius. Conflicting reports surround Alpharius's rediscovery. Some accounts claim Horus himself found Alpharius leading a renegade fleet, while others suggest the Emperor saved him from alien captors, or that Alpharius was marooned on a dead world. Another version of the tale recounts how the Luna Wolves responded to a distress beacon, only to fall into a trap. During the ambush, Horus confronted an assassin who had infiltrated his flagship, only to realize the attacker was his lost brother, Alpharius. The truth of these accounts remains murky, as does much about the Alpha Legion. What is known is that Alpharius, upon reuniting with the Emperor, assumed command of the 20th Legion and transformed them into a force as secretive and complex as their Primarch himself. That same year, the Iron Warriors undertook the burning of the Farron Drift, Led by the 3rd, 14th, and 72nd Grand Battalions, they suppressed a rebellion in the Faran Drift with devastating force. The campaign saw heavy casualties, with the 3rd Grand Battalion losing 80% of its strength. However, all target worlds were depopulated, and the rebellion was crushed. Primarch Perturabo deemed the losses acceptable, continuing his legion's grim tradition of prioritizing victory at any cost. In 984, the Shrout system was brought into imperial compliance through a joint campaign conducted by the Emperor's children, Night Lords, and Imperial Fists legions. Following the victory, the 3 Primarchs, Fulgrim, Conrad Kurz, and Rogel Dorn, gathered to celebrate their success. However, the festivities took a dark turn when Kurz, plagued by one of his violent episodes, confided in Fulgrim. The Night Haunter spoke of chilling visions, his own death at the hands of their father, the Primarchs turning on each other, and the eventual destruction of his homeworld, Nostramo, by the Emperor's light. Troubled by these forewarnings, Fulgrim relayed Kurz's confessions to Rogel Dorn. Dorn, ever loyal to the Emperor, was incensed by what he saw as slander against the Master of Mankind and confronted Kurz directly. What followed remains unclear, but Dorn was later found bleeding and unconscious, with gouges torn into his torso. Kurz, weeping and racked with guilt, was discovered crouched over his fallen brother. The Night Haunter was taken into custody and confined to his chambers while the other Primarchs debated his fate. Before any decision could be reached, Kurz escaped. When the Primarchs came to retrieve him, they found his guards slaughtered and their brother gone. The Night Haunter and the Night Lord's Legion disappeared into the warp, leaving behind only questions and mounting unease. Later that same year, Kurz's grim prophecy came to pass. Under his orders, the Night Lords unleashed a devastating exterminatus upon their homeworld of Nostramo, targeting the planet's unstable core with concentrated lance strikes. The resulting seismic cataclysm tore Nostramo apart, reducing it to an orbiting field of debris. This destruction fulfilled Kurz's vision of white light, obliterating his homeworld. For this heinous act, the Emperor summoned Kurz to Terra to face judgment. However, before this could happen, the Night Haunter aligned with War Master Horus in rebellion, cementing his place as one of the Imperium's most infamous traitors. In 987, the Raven Guard launched a guerrilla campaign against the Crave on the world of Indrasul. The Crave, monstrous psychic xenos, enslaved the human population of the planet and used them as a food source, drawing strength from their suffering. The Raven Guard infiltrated the Crave's strongholds, striking with surgical precision and eradicating the Xenos. Corax himself led the final assault that cast down the Crave and liberated the planet. However, unbeknownst to the Raven Guard, the survivors of Indrasul would later be deemed irredeemably corrupted and were condemned to servitude as lobotomized servitors by the Iterators and other Imperial officials. The following year, in 988, the Mariposa campaign began. A region of space consisting of 12 subsectors was released from a warp storm that had raged since the Age of Strife. Over the course of 3 Terran years, the Blood Angels, Imperial Fists, Imperial Army, and Sisters of Silence fought against hordes of warp-twisted mutant cults and rogue psychers, bringing 34 new worlds into the Imperium. The campaign was a testament to the strength of unity among the various arms of the Imperium, and the Emperor's vision of order imposed upon chaos. In 989, reports surfaced of renewed activity by the Akherith, a dangerous parasitic xenospecies known as the Bone Drinkers. These creatures fed on the bone marrow of living beings, their psychic link forming a gestalt consciousness. The Alpha Legion was tasked with the xenocide of the Akherith and worked alongside the Magi biologists to create a genetically targeted bioweapon. This virus poisoned the Bone Drinkers' food source, the human populations near the Olmec stellar wastes. Though the Akherith were driven to extinction, 7% of the human population also succumbed to the virus, a calculated sacrifice deemed necessary by the Imperium to eliminate the threat. Finally, around 990, Corax and the Raven Guard returned to Indrasul for the final phase of the Crave xenocide. Pressing the boundaries of the Segmentum Obscurus in the far galactic north, the Raven Guard discovered the largest Crave dominion encountered in Imperial history. After a prolonged and bloody campaign, Korax succeeded in wiping out the Crave and liberating the world from their predation. The victory was bittersweet, as the human survivors were deemed too corrupted by the Crave's influence to be reintegrated into the Imperium and were instead transformed into servitors. With each victory, the Imperium continued to expand, yet the cost in lives, morality, and the bonds between brothers steadily grew heavier. In the mid-900s, the Dark Angels undertook the Siege of Barakan, an arduous Imperial compliance campaign against orcs on the planet of the same name. One of the most notable events of this campaign was the defense of Firebase Endriago, where a chapter of Dark Angels was cut off and trapped by the Greenskins for 18 grueling solar months. Supplies dwindled, weapons shattered, and the beleaguered Space Marines were forced to fight with fists and improvised weapons scavenged from bombed-out strongpoints. Among the heroes of the siege was Brother Nemiel, who inspired his brothers to acts of defiance through relentless taunting of the orcs and personal displays of incredible valor. Even after a Greenskin's crude axe shattered his knee, Nemiel refused to yield. He grabbed the orc by its tusks and killed it with a savage kick. When the final line of defense was breached, Nemiel engaged a massive Xenos champion in a duel, holding his ground long enough for his chapter to launch a desperate counterattack that shattered the Greenskin forces. When relief forces finally broke through to Firebase Endriago, Nemiel stood atop the ramparts, cheering alongside his brothers. It took several solar minutes before he realized that the cheers were not for their victory, but for him. Shortly thereafter, Nemiel's chapter unanimously voted for him to take the place of Brother Redemptor Barthiel, who had fallen during the darkest hours of the siege. In 994, the Istvan system was brought into imperial compliance by the Raven Guard under Primarch Corvus Corax. The campaign required considerable force to subdue the system, so Corax appointed Vardus Prahl, a career politician and former officer of the 11th Lastran Rifles of the Imperial Army, as the system's ruler. As an outlander, Prahl was seen as a neutral choice to govern over the conquered system and enforce imperial rule. Around 995, the Hith system was pacified in one of the largest military operations of the Great Crusade to that point. Over 200,000 Space Marines from various legions were deployed alongside Titan legions Mortis, Audax, and Vulpa, as well as auxiliary units. The orcs of Charhak, who dominated the Hit system, were utterly destroyed in a show of overwhelming imperial force. In 997, the Space Wolves' 954th Expeditionary Fleet, led by Wolflord Bolve and the infamous 13th Company, successfully conquered the non-compliant human world of Kernunos. The campaign demonstrated the Space Wolves' unrelenting ferocity in battle, further cementing their reputation as the Emperor's executioners. The Dark Angels were deeply entrenched in the Shield Worlds during the suppression of the Gordian League, a confederation of human worlds allied with degenerate Xenos. This prolonged compliance campaign, spanning from 998 to 5, took place as the heresy loomed on the horizon. By the time news of Horus's treachery and the Istvan III atrocity reached Lion L. Johnson, his legion was too embroiled in the Shield Worlds to respond quickly. Estimations from Johnson's staff suggested it would take at least 8 solar months to conclude operations and reposition for action against Horus's forces. Realizing the importance of strategic targets, Johnson prioritized securing the Forge World of Diamat, an essential supply hub. Leading a battle group of 15 warships, the Lions set out to prevent the War Master from fortifying Istvan V with Diamat's substantial stockpiles of ordnance and war material. In 999, the Compliance of Melchior was a joint operation carried out by the Luna Wolves and the Blood Angels legions. The world was the last stronghold of the Nephilim, a parasitic xenospecies that had plagued humanity, consuming its host slowly and insidiously. The Nephilim had claimed over 100 worlds before settling on Melchior, a planet of shining sands. On Melchior, the combined wrath of the Luna Wolves and Blood Angels descended upon the Nephilim. The two legions fought shoulder to shoulder, their fury leaving no quarter for the Xenos invaders. Trapped between the brutality of two of the Imperium's most ferocious legions, the Nephilim were exterminated, and the shining sands of Melchior were left stained with their blood. The Great Crusade's final years were marked by both triumph and tragedy, as each victory further consolidated the Imperium's dominion while sowing the seeds of the heresy yet to come. In 999, the Thousand Sons, alongside a small contingent of space wolves, undertook the subjugation of Agoru. While initial Imperial compliance was achieved diplomatically, the campaign escalated when the Thousand Sons encountered warp entities referred to by the locals as Elohim. These beings hiding within the subterranean passages of the artificial structure known as the Mountain were engaged and destroyed with the assistance of the Space Wolves. The alliance between the two legions, however, would soon begin to fray as their philosophical differences and deep-seated mistrust of each other continued to grow. The same year, the Imperial Fists carried out the World Prince campaign on an unnamed hive world against a stubborn human monarch who refused compliance. Rogel Dorn personally led the campaign, systematically conquering hive cities one by one. Progress was slow but steady until the Alpha Legion arrived unexpectedly, claiming to assist. Though no Alpha Legion warriors appeared on the battlefield, their influence was felt in the form of uprisings and assassinations that plunged the planet into chaos. The World Prince capitulated after the deaths of over 400 members of his nobility, enraging Dorn. In a heated confrontation, Dorn scorned Alfarius for his clandestine methods and ordered the Alpha Legion to leave. Before departing, Dorn dissected the Alpha Legion's plan in detail, exposing its flaws and walking away in disgust. Around the same time, the Alpha Legion also responded to a call for aid from the 617th Expeditionary Fleet during the compliance of Nurth. This campaign ended disastrously when chaos-tainted forces activated a warp-infused artifact called the Black Cube, transforming the planet into a world inimical to all sentient life. Most of the Imperial forces deployed to Nurth perished, and the planet was permanently lost to the Imperium. At the turn of the millennium, the Alpha Legion entered into an enigmatic alliance with the Xenos faction known as the Cabal. The full extent of this alliance would remain a closely guarded secret, buried beneath layers of misinformation and deception that defined the Alpha Legion's operations. Around the same time, the Ullanor Crusade unfolded, marking one of the most significant campaigns in the Great Crusade's history. This vast imperial assault targeted the Orc Empire of Overlord Erlak Uruk on the world of Ullanor Prime, the largest greenskin empire ever encountered. The Crusade deployed 100,000 Space Marines, 8 million Imperial Army troops, Titan legions, and thousands of starships. After a titanic struggle, the Orcs were defeated, and the Ullanor Crusade was declared a resounding success. Following the victory, the triumph of Ullanor was held to commemorate the Imperium's greatest conquest. It was during this triumph that the Emperor made a pivotal decision. He would return to Terra to undertake his secret project to open the Eldari Webway for humanity's use. In his absence, the Emperor named Horus Lupercal, the Primarch of the Luna Wolves, as the Imperial War Master, granting him command authority over all other Primarchs and expeditionary fleets. This moment marked the high point of the Great Crusade, but also planted the seeds of future betrayal, as the weight of the Emperor's expectations and the jealousies of his brothers would soon lead Horus down a dark path. In early 001 of the 31st millennium, the Thousand Sons, Space Wolves, and Wordbearers legions launched the Arc Reach Cluster Campaign, a compliance effort targeting a group of defiant planetary empires. The campaign's first victories were hard-fought but successful, with the Space Wolves and Wordbearers taking 4 systems. However, the 5th and 6th worlds, particularly the planet Shrike, required the psychic might of the Thousand Sons to prevail. During this campaign, the dreaded flesh change mutation reemerged within the Thousand Sons, fueling the Space Wolves' deep mistrust of their allies. The Wolves began to see the 15th Legion as dangerously tainted, a perception that would deepen the enmity between the two legions and contribute to the events leading to the burning of Prospero. Meanwhile, the Luna Wolves faced the rebellion of the Akum Sothos cluster, a region they had previously brought into compliance. Under the influence of Xenos entities known as the Unsighted Kings, the human population of the cluster rose against imperial rule. Horus formulated a plan to eliminate the Unsighted Kings while preserving the cluster's infrastructure. 4 legions, the Luna Wolves, Space Wolves, Iron Warriors, and Raven Guard converged on the heavily fortified lair of the Xenos leaders. Despite initial setbacks and heavy losses, the Raven Guard, led by Corax himself, breached Gate 42. Horus claimed the honor of slaying the unsighted kings, dispelling their psychic influence, and securing the cluster for the Imperium. The cost, however, was staggering, with thousands of Raven Guard, particularly Terran-born veterans, giving their lives in the assault. Lastly, the cleansing of 28-3, later known as Laron, marked a turning point for the Emperor's Children Legion. Under Fulgrim's command, the 28th Expeditionary Fleet encountered the Serpentine Xenos race, known as the Lair. Fulgrim, disgusted by the Xenos lay claim to perfection, vowed to bring their world into compliance within a solar month. Against all odds, the Emperor's children achieved this feat, though at great cost. The Lair never surrendered, and their last defenders died protecting a temple dedicated to the chaos god Slaanesh. Within the temple, Fulgrim discovered the silver blade of the Lair, an artifact that would mark the beginning of his and his legion's eventual fall to chaos. As the Great Crusade neared its end, the victories of the Imperium were immense, but the cracks in its foundations had begun to show. In the year 001 of the 31st millennium, the Imperium's Great Crusade reached one of its most contentious and turbulent phases. The First Cobalt War began when the 40th Expeditionary Fleet encountered an unusually humanoid Xenos race in Cobalt space. Their base of operations, a dazzling, transparent vessel nicknamed Scintilla City by the Imperials, was later identified as the Eldari craft world Thuila. Without warning, the Eldari attacked the fleet, fighting the Imperial forces to a bloody standstill. A call for reinforcements brought the intervention of the Space Wolves' Third Great Company, Tra Company. The Wolves unleashed their ferocity with devastating effect, obliterating the craft world so utterly that nothing of it remained to plunder. While the destruction of Thuila was hailed as a victory, the actions of the Space Wolves horrified the commanders of the Expeditionary Fleet, leaving them reluctant to call upon the Wolves again. Despite this reluctance, when the 40th Expeditionary Fleet later encountered the cybernetic abhumans known as the Olamic Quietude during the Second Cobalt War, they once again called for the Space Wolves' aid. The Quietude's defenses were formidable, but through the use of specialized weapons, stealth, and unrelenting force, the Wolves shattered their orbital docks and overcame their elite soldiers, the Robusts. The Quietude's ice-covered homeworld was swiftly invaded and their civilization annihilated. The Chondax campaign began shortly after the triumph of Ulanor, when Warmaster Horus ordered Jagatai Khan and his White Scars to eradicate the remnants of the Orc Empire shattered on Ulanor. Over 6 long standard years, the Khan's warriors scoured the Chondax system, culminating in the brutal extermination of the Greenskin forces on the White World. The campaign was still underway when the White Scars received word of the Horus heresy and the War Master's betrayal. Their attempt to break free from the Alpha Legion's cordon delayed their return to Terra, but the White Scars fought their way clear, leaving the Alpha Legion's fleet in ruins as they set out to uncover the truth of Horus's rebellion. In the same year, the Council of Nicaea marked a turning point in the Imperium's stance on psychic abilities. Convened by the Emperor himself, the conclave was held to address growing concerns about sorcery and the Thousand Sons Legion's use of psychic powers under Magnus the Red. Many of the Primarchs, including Leman Russ of the Space Wolves and Mortarion of the Death Guard, spoke out vehemently against the Thousand Sons, claiming their practices were dangerously similar to those of the warp-tainted Psykers, who had destroyed worlds during the Age of Strife. Magnus defended his legion, arguing that their psychic abilities were a gift and a tool for the betterment of mankind. The Emperor's judgment was decisive. The use of sorcery was officially banned. All Space Marine librarians were ordered to cease their psychic practices and return to regular duties. Chaplains, based on Lorgar's model from the Word Bearers, were introduced across the legions to ensure compliance with these decrees. Magnus, viewing the council as a personal trial, retreated to his homeworld of Prospero, humiliated but defiant. Despite the edicts of Nicaea, the Thousand Sons secretly continued their pursuit of psychic knowledge, setting them on a dark path that would culminate in their fall to chaos during the Horus heresy. In the early years of the 31st millennium, the Great Crusade surged onward, yet the tensions between brothers and the shadow of darker truths began to surface. The compliance of 63-19 was an unplanned engagement resulting from a warp storm that diverted the Luna Wolves' 63rd Expeditionary Fleet. The fleet encountered a human civilization ruled by a self-proclaimed Emperor of Mankind on the third planet of a 9-world system. What began as diplomatic talks soon broke down when Captain Hastur Sejanus was killed. Despite the provocation, Horus did not retaliate immediately. Instead, he attempted a second diplomatic envoy, but this too ended in disaster when Malagurst's Stormbird was shot down. Horus launched a full-scale planetary assault, spearheaded by the Luna Wolves' first captain Ezekiel Abaddon, alongside Titans and Imperial air support. The false emperor revealed himself in a final confrontation within the capital city's throne room, striking down many of the Luna Wolves' elite Chillin Reavers before Horus teleported directly into the chamber and ended the Pretender with a single combi bolter shot. The compliance was secured, but superstitious whispers of a warp entity called Samus, tied to the region's Whisperhead Mountains, lingered in the minds of those who witnessed strange phenomena during the campaign. Shortly after, the compliance of 140-20 brought another deadly trial for the Imperium. Known more informally as Murder, this death world served as a prison for the arachnoid xenos species called the Megarachnids. The Blood Angels of the 140th Expeditionary Fleet were the first to encounter these formidable xenos and suffered heavy losses. Lord Commander Eidolon of the Emperor's Children arrived with the elite First Company, only for his forces to fare no better. Relief came with the arrival of the Luna Wolves' 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, along with Titans of the Legio Mortis and tens of thousands of Imperial Army soldiers. Despite months of grinding combat, the campaign was interrupted when the Interrex, an advanced human civilization, arrived to investigate the Imperials' assault on what they deemed a reservation world for the Megarachnids. This unexpected development shifted Imperial priorities, leading Horus to focus on negotiations with the Interrex instead of fully exterminating the Xenos of Murder. The Diasporex Persecution was an extended naval campaign against a fleet-based civilization of humans and Xenos who refused the Imperium's demands for separation. The Iron Hands Legion led the charge, attempting to destroy the Diasporex, but the Nomads' exceptional skill in void combat proved challenging. Reinforcements from the Emperor's Children turned the tide, and the combined Astartes force launched a final assault. During the battle, Fulgrim's flagship came under attack, prompting Ferrus Manus to rescue his brother. This act, rather than fostering camaraderie, deepened Fulgrim's resentment under the influence of the corrupted Silver Blade of the Lair. The conflict ended with the annihilation of the Diasporex, but the seeds of animosity between Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus were firmly sown. In the compliance of 154-4, the verdant world of Ibsen revealed an unusual population of humans coexisting with Eldari. Further investigation uncovered that the human inhabitants were descendants of Salamander's nocturne survivors, liberated from Drukhari captivity by the craftworld Eldari. Despite their shared ancestry, the Eldari Alliance and resistance to the Imperial Truth condemned Ibsen's people. Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders, declared the planet beyond redemption and ordered it purged. After its cleansing, the dead world was renamed Caldera and prepared for resettlement by loyal Imperial citizens. Finally, the compliance of 154-6, known as the Campaign for Karaton, showcased the growing rift between Vulcan and his brother Conrad Kurz. The Salamanders and Night Lords fought alongside Mechanicum Titan legions and Imperial army regiments to bring the world to compliance. However, the Night Lords' brutal tactics, including the massacre of an entire city's population to spread fear, enraged Vulcan. A confrontation between the two Primarchs led to a physical altercation, but the campaign concluded successfully. Vulcan reported Kurz's actions to War Master Horus and Rogald Dorn, further exacerbating tensions within the Brotherhood of Primarchs as the Great Crusade approached its darkest hour. In the second year of the 31st millennium, the Cavus Belt Expedition unfolded. Many tribes of orcs, scattered and leaderless after the hammer blow they had suffered during the Ulanor Crusade, had fled to the far corners of the galaxy. Many of these tribes came to rest in the mineral-rich rocks of the Cavus Belt, where they carved new outposts, licked their wounds, and rearmed. The Alpha Legion had tracked them to their lair and petitioned the War Master Horus for reinforcements to execute their plan of annihilation. However, after the campaign at the world called Murder and the disastrous engagement with the civilization known as the Interrex, the Luna Wolves had been reluctant to commit warships to Alpharius's new campaign. In the end, it was the Blood Angels who agreed to assist their cousins in the 20th Legion, with Sanguinius himself marshalling a sizable intervention to support the efforts of the 88th Expeditionary Fleet. The mission, Alpharius claimed, would take 5 standard years. The Angel rejected this premise and promised it would be over in 1. Sanguinius committed vessels from every active Blood Angels expeditionary fleet to the cause. Sanguinius was ultimately proved right, more or less. Just over 13 solar months after the commencement of the Cavus Initiative, the Orcs were almost totally annihilated. In the 3rd year of the 31st millennium, the Luna Wolves were officially renamed the Sons of Horus. The same year saw the First War of Zenobia during the Imperium's feud with the Interrex, a highly advanced human civilization allied with several Xenos species such as the Kinnebrak. The full array of warp-based technologies available to the Kinnebrak vessels was unleashed, creating localized warp storms, deadly plagues capable of felling even space marines within solar minutes, and other esoteric horrors. The conflict began when the Interrex accused the Imperials of stealing an artifact, the Kinnebrak Anathame, from a museum of technology on Zenobia. Unbeknownst to most, the word-bearer's first chaplain Erebus had orchestrated the theft, ensuring that the Anathame would find its way into the hands of the renegade planetary governor Eugen Temba on the moon of the world of Davin. In the 4th year of the 31st millennium, the Davin's Moon campaign marked a pivotal moment in Imperial history. The War Master Horus was grievously wounded by the malefic Chaos Blade, known as the Kinnebrak Anathame, while fighting Eugen Temba and the Nurgle corrupted rebels on the moon of Davin. Horus was healed within the ancient Serpent Lodge of Davin's Moon by its priests through the use of chaos sorcery. Though his life was saved, his soul was forfeit to the ruinous powers, who exploited the slivers of jealousy, mistrust, and selfish desire within Horus's heart to turn him against his father, the Emperor. From this day forth, Horus made plans to bring the Imperium to ruin and topple the Emperor from power, preparing in secret for a sudden and ruthless civil war. Finally, in that same year, the Battle of Tarsus occurred. Primarch Fulgrim, leading his 28th Expeditionary Fleet, met with the renowned Eldari Farseer Eldrad Ulthran of Craftworld Ulthwé on the maiden world of Tarsus. The Farseer attempted to warn Fulgrim of the War Master's corruption by chaos following his wounding by the Anathame. However, Fulgrim, influenced by the corrupting power of his Lair Daemon Blade and his deep loyalty to Horus, reacted with violent outrage. The encounter erupted into a furious battle. Fulgrim, alongside his Emperor's Children captains and personal Phoenix Guard, attacked Eldrad and his retinue. Though the Emperor's Children succeeded in slaying both the revered Eldari Wraithlord Kiraean and Goldhelm, Eldrad and his forces sorrowfully withdrew, realizing that chaos had already claimed another of the Mon K's Primarchs. Fulgrim, further corrupted by his Daemon Blade, ordered the destruction of several Eldari maiden worlds using hideous virus bombs, believing the Eldari to be a treacherous Xenos race that sought to divide the Imperium through lies about its leaders. In the 4th year of the 31st millennium, the Battle of Deep Orbital DS-191 unfolded. Following his delegation to the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, Fulgrim announced to his senior commanders that he would lead a small force to join Ferrus Manus and his Iron Hands at Kalanides IV in the Kalanides system under the pretense of clearing it of an orc infestation. Fulgrim spearheaded the assault on Deep Orbital DS-191, leading the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd companies of the Emperor's Children. During the battle, Captain Solomon Demeter, commander of the 2nd Company, found himself unsupported by the 1st and 3rd companies as outlined in the battle plan. Overextended and in danger of annihilation, Demeter's 2nd Company was saved only by the timely arrival of the 10th and 13th Companies, led by Captains Saul Tarvitz and Lucius. These two junior officers, whom Demeter had recently grown closer to, as he was increasingly excluded by the higher echelons of the Third Legion, acted without orders to rescue their brothers. Lord Commander Vespasian, a loyal and honorable officer, bore witness to these dishonorable actions and felt compelled to act. He resolved to address the betrayal of Demeter's company by Captains Kessoron and Virosian. This decision would ultimately cost Vespasian his life, as he was murdered by Fulgrim himself. Corrupted by chaos, Fulgrim realized Vespasian would never follow him into betrayal and eliminated the commander to secure his dark plans. In the same year, the Vulpes Straits Flood migration devastated Imperial forces. The Iron Warriors' 51st Expeditionary Fleet, led by warsmith Barabas d'Antioch, engaged the Hrud on the fortress world of Golgius. The Xenos and Tropic Fields aged stone and flesh alike, reducing even the mighty Space Marines to little more than dust. Their venomous claws finished what their unnatural powers began. The Iron Warriors' garrison on Golgius was annihilated, leaving d'Antioch prematurely aged and crippled. Few survivors escaped as Stormbirds retrieved the remnants of the fleet. Warsmith d'Antioch questioned the wisdom of Primarch Perturabo's extermination campaign against the Hrud, which had cost half a Grand Company. For his defiance, d'Antioch was relieved of command and permanently assigned to the garrison of the remote world of Lesser Damantine. Around the same time, the cleansing of Aragata saw the sons of Horus, Ultramarines, and World Eaters legions join forces to bring the rebellious world into compliance. Imperial envoys were executed by the planet's leaders in a bloody display of defiance. Most of the world fell swiftly, but its central fortress resisted fiercely. Horus tasked Angron, Primarch of the World Eaters, with taking the fortress and sparing only the planet's leaders. Angron led the charge with his usual ferocity, but the fortress was heavily defended. The World Eaters suffered horrendous casualties, with a dozen Space Marines falling for every meter of ground taken. Ultimately, the fortress was breached using a ramp of corpses, and Angron's warriors slaughtered every last inhabitant in a blood-soaked frenzy. Though Robote Guilliman intended to confront Horus and Angron about the massacre, the outbreak of the Horus heresy cut short his plans, as both Primarchs soon turned against the Emperor. Between the 4th and 5th years of the 31st millennium, the war in the Webway erupted. After learning of Horus's treachery and his pact with the Chaos Gods, Magnus the Red sought to warn the Emperor psychically. However, in doing so, Magnus shattered the wards protecting the Emperor's secret project, a massive conduit designed to access the Eldari Webway. This breach allowed demons to pour into the Imperial Palace's dungeons, igniting a solar decade-long war that saw the Custodians and Sisters of Silence fighting to hold back the forces of chaos at the very heart of Terra. Finally, between the 4th and 14th years of the 31st millennium, the burning of Prospero occurred. After Magnus's psychic warning violated the edicts of Nicaea, Leman Russ was dispatched at the head of a censure force comprised of the Space Wolves, the Custodians, and the Sisters of Silence to bring Magnus to Terra in chains. When the Thousand Suns refused to surrender, their world of Prospero was consumed in a cataclysmic battle that shattered reality itself. Magnus and his surviving warriors fled into the Warp, where they ultimately pledged themselves to the service of the Chaos God Tzeentch. Between the 4th and 7th years of the 31st millennium, the Purgation of Arcanath unfolded. A force of 500 Ultramarines legionaries waged a grueling 3-standard-year-long campaign to liberate the human population of Arcanath from the psychic enslavement of the Vectate Xenos Overmind. The Ultramarines' determination and tactical precision ultimately freed the planet, extinguishing the alien threat and bringing Arcanath into Imperial compliance. At the same time, the Battle of Cygnus Prime began between the 4th and 6th years of the 31st millennium. The Blood Angels Legion, led by their Primarch Sanguinius, was sent to the remote Cygnus cluster by the War Master Horus, under the pretense of quelling a local uprising. However, the campaign was a trap set by Horus, who feared Sanguinius as both a rival for the ruinous powers, favor, and a potential obstacle to his plans. In the 5th year of the 31st millennium, the Blood Angels were assaulted by the demonic legions of chaos on Cygnus Prime. Reality itself unraveled as psychic assaults and otherworldly horrors tore at the Blood Angels. This was the first time a Space Marine Legion encountered the full, unbridled fury of the Warp's dark entities. leaving the Blood Angels forever changed by their trials. Also, in the 5th year of the 31st millennium, the Jorgal execution unfolded. The humanoid Xenos species known as the Jorgal were infamous for their extensive cybernetic enhancements designed to improve their combat effectiveness. The campaign against them was spearheaded by the Death Guard Legion, led by their Primarch Mortarion, alongside the Sisters of Silence. The combined forces launched an assault on the Jorgal's massive cylinder world in the Iota Horology system. The Death Guard penetrated the drive cluster and destroyed the Xenos control center, while Battle Captain Nathaniel Garrow and an elite force from the Sisters of Silence neutralized the alien hatcheries. When the Mechanicum contingent requested time to scavenge Xenos technology, Mortarion denied the petition, citing Malkador the Sigilite's orders that the Jorgal were to be exterminated entirely without compromise. Later that same year, the Battle of Isstvan Extremis saw the 1st Company of the Emperor's Children fighting alongside the Death Guard's 7th Battle Company under the command of Battle Captain Nathaniel Garrow against traitor forces on the outermost planet of the Isstvan system. During the battle, Garrow sustained devastating injuries, including crushing damage to his torso, a shattered arm, and the loss of his right leg. His survival was only made possible by the medical skills of Chief Apothecary Fabius of the Emperor's Children. In the same engagement, Lord Commander Eidolon of the Emperor's Children revealed a disturbing, previously unknown ability. Using a modified tracheal implant bonded to his vocal cords, he unleashed a paralyzing sonic shriek, a technology reminiscent of the Xenos' lair. This weapon allowed Eidolon to kill a Slaaneshi psyker known as a Warsinger, helping the Space Marines to secure victory. However, this incident was a grim foreshadowing of the chaos corruption rapidly consuming the Emperor's Children Legion. With the seeds of rebellion sown and loyalties beginning to waver, the galaxy teeters on the brink of disaster. The Great Crusade, once a beacon of unity, now casts long shadows that will soon give way to the storm of the Horus Heresy. Thank you for watching.